feel that waterfall of renewal on your face. For if the transformation is individual, that is more than enough. In fact, that's better than expected. That's super normal. To achieve that level, you're doing good enough. After that, a lot of times you just have a net positive effect because you didn't cultivate bad things that cause sickness and death. Look, people, we were all deceived by the delusional realm at least one time in our lives. And you could be deceived right now, perceiving me as some kind of enemy. Your best friend, a counselor, a healer, an ashipu, someone that many people find venerable, at least, even if one can be misguided, and one knows that because one knows about the delusional realm. And so it is not a self-blame game or blame game. It's an admission that we can be deceived from time to time. A lot of things are elaborate, and we're also talking about the king of the sensual realms in play. But for good reason, because he doth divide the wheat from the chaff, does he not? All of those that built from scratch the Eckhart module. A few mentions here and there. Just not so casual conversation, which led to this causality, that causality, to the cure of kilesas, at least a partial cure, just a day by day, step by step, breath by breath kind of cure. So what happens outside, or the retrograde conditions one might meet culturally, spiritually, psychologically, you name it, economically, that does not mean that you have to engage in ill will. That's not skillful. It's the other way, the Taoist kind of way, that's sort of very counterintuitive at times, but that's what makes it so wise. So very wise on so many different levels. And so all of these things are getting shined up at once into a new synthesis of total health. But use it in very small doses, right? It's about the middle path. It is not about overdoing these things. Yes, insights are one thing, but practicality is another. How have you washed your hands? If you come in from the street, whatever gunk might have been on it, can you wash that off now with some warm, hot, soapy water? Can you start anew, afresh? Can you activate that renewal module, that redemption module, that I'm not engaging in self-blame about this or that eccentricity. I'm just here right now doing something very wholesome. And isn't it wonderful? Look at this new soap that they have coming out each new day. Soap has gotten so much better than it was just 100 years ago. And that's because the good people have been focusing on good things much out of the public view. If the public not be able to bear it, or at least the pretense that is the case. But perhaps they're all wrong. Perhaps we've been all wrong. Perhaps we can reapproach these things of realizing that perfection, it's not possible. We know that. That's why we have so much compassion for all of the cripples out there. Yes, every last one of you. Why should we not have compassion towards you? But we also understand causality. But these things, these causalities don't just end in personal responsibility, because a lot of this stuff is out of our control. Just randomness, neutrality, it can happen. All of this is so complex. Look at the complexity of flowers that bloom and then wilt away and turn to dust. These metaphors are all around us. So why not cultivate that? To give yourself that renewed energy so that you can do good things, not bad things. We have a list of the bad things. We were missing it for so long. Kalisa. Anyone can have them. Anyone can have an outbreak of acne. That does not mean they're a bad person, but do we know where that comes from? Some people do, some people don't. We don't know. There are causalities, scientific, yes, but where does it all begin? If we expand our consciousness of what the universe could be and all of its dimensionality, such as the James Webb Telescope has proven to be true, in that field of astronomy, of which I am enamored, for providing us new realities that were always there, we just didn't see it. It's the same thing with the soul, the chitta of the heart. And the same dedication and skill is required there as with any other living organism. Your psychology should be cultivated to not be aggravating or lower aggravation levels instead of higher aggravation levels. You see that basic principle? Don't flip that switch. For yourself at least. It's not open for political debate. It's just basic human compassion. Now, where this all fits, the idea is that good things can happen for good people because they do good things, and then that is manifest. It's very pragmatic. It's on the wrestling mat kind of pragmatic, clear statement for your own benefit and the benefit of others. Can I get an amen? Or would I be booed out of the assembly? For what? Speaking openly about medicinal practices that do bring results that are undeniable? What forces in the world would stand in the way of redemption as a concept, as a poet would put it, if one were to exist here and now? So why not be enchanted from the idea that you have optionality and that you can cultivate the good things and you can reduce the bad things? Can we not adopt that principle now? I give you permission to do so. So the idea of net benefit transcends personal benefit. But often they are correlated. Wouldn't it be great if we can put stuff in a container and ship it and it stays fresh inside? Hey, how about a can? And then there were people that got into canning, and look at all of that wonderful, good cannedness we have now that has solved an infinite number of problems that up until that point were extremely difficult to solve and led to massive amounts of wastage. And it was all due to inefficiencies in processing. But that does not mean that the people that are caught up in those systems are bad people. It's just that you need multiple people working in unison to have civilizational advance. And they have to have certain morals and ethics, but they can also have a lot of other things that other people don't need to be over obsessed with, because people are different and they can live differently, and as long as it's within reason, it should be tolerated by civilized societies. Now, there are not very many of those in this world. Less than 2% is, I think, I heard a term, but it could be more than that. Who knows? Maybe 10%? So, some people don't know how to cooperate. That's where you get that greed factor and takeovers and other uncouth behavior that has known bad consequences, especially if they're managed poorly. And yet, every day is a new day. There's no historical inevitability to any wrong decisions. I woke up today, I looked at my shoes. Well, yesterday they weren't quite the right pair, so today I'm going to wear a different pair. It's that depersonalized. Is it a net benefit? Yes or no? Do not look away from that essential principle. So if those who claim I'm bad are saying that's a bad principle, then they're guilty by association for the inverse relationship to that principle, are they not? Just on a theoretical level, it has nothing to do with personality. So would not that be a bias itself? Just saying this is how people get discredited at some point, because you have discrepancies between promises and deliveries. And that's actionable in all things, including management of any kind, administration of any kind, like the new standards for them, so that you can have an administration and not just the appearance of one. But back to comedy for just a moment. How about all these people now trained to blame other people for their bad feelings, their crankiness or whatever, their desires and aversions and delusions too? That one should accommodate them. I guess because they're privileged, their feelings matter more than being understanding towards the other side, or perhaps respecting one's elders a little bit more, kind of thing, versus some kind of accusatory know-it-allism. How would that be elegant or cool or functional going forward? If it wasn't, who would think that would be a good thing and why? Imagine that, there's just a committee. It's not a personal attack. Just an open air question. And see what happens. Now that's real entertainment. If you want to have it, you can, because I guess it's here. It just, apparently people haven't been paying attention. And that's why it presumably continues. But you can always have new ideas and new people come in and bring some new life into the situation. And it don't mean nothing other than that. Really don't. But how about people find the good people to blame? I guess that's the bad people, isn't it? First off, blaming it, and then what do they blame? Now, I get it. I can blame people that do bad things. Like, break something. Who likes or wants to be a window breaker? Aren't windows a wonderful thing? And then there's people that go around break a window. Who likes that type of person? Can we say that that person is bad? I think we can. So who is engaging in bad behavior and who isn't? Who's being skillful and who isn't? Who's being wise or witty or funny or persuasive and who isn't? Someone runs in, screams some profanity, and demands attention because they're them. That's not skillful, is it? So what would be the opposite of that? Is that blame? Or is that a lot of compassion for misguided people, but not too much? I mean, how atrocious that is in karmic terms. But again, via the Zen module, they're the inverse relationship to the good. So don't be like that. By degree, change your mind, change what you think, change what you do, change your microenvironments, and take a bunch of ablutions and no selves and returning to the breath and safety, and perhaps even under limited circumstances, you might just be in a kuti for a while. And if it works, then how crazy of an idea is that you could have shelter for yourself without that being impossible? Not that that's something to be encouraged, but just saying it's a good, useful thought exercise. If your situation is comfortable and you have relatively good price value, why not? But if those variables change, and they do, oftentimes they do, well then making better decisions for oneself is always the best principle that we can all share with a deep sense of mudita, vicarious joy, knowing that some people will understand that principle and implement. Thank you all so much. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. See, you can say that one over and over again, and then see the colors: white, green, yellow, blue, red, black, or devas, asuras, humans, animals, Preta, the hungry ghost, and Naraka. See, Naraka, hatred, aggression. What defeats it? See, black. What defeats it? Wisdom. Wisdom, hum. That's very important. Me, renunciation. See, that's what. Red, see, is the color. It can also be bliss. When you renounce something, you get bliss. Yeah. You defeated the hungry ghost. You've killed greed and possessiveness. Oh, this is me, mine, me, mine, me. See, me, hum. You've defeated me. Renunciation, it's selflessness. So pad, diligence. And what does it defeat? Ignorance. That is a main hindrance of people. Blue, equanimity is what you get with diligence. You're sitting high and dry. Pod, you launched with that pod, or you jumped like a lily pad from pad to pad. You didn't stay on the one lily pad and get eaten. You were diligent. You made yourself free, and that's where the equanimity comes in. It's real. It's practiced. It's experienced. It's realized. So need, patience, see, defeats passion and desire. Oh, I want that now. But if you can, well, maybe I'm not going to do something bad during the week because that will mess me up. So I'm going to keep it for the weekend. And then even then, I'm probably going to do some more healing exercises, maybe bowing or other stress positions, or focusing on the breath, or doing those types of things in order to pick the trash out of every corner and crevice of my grotto that I didn't even see the first time. But the longer I sit there, all of a sudden I realize I'm looking at a piece of styrofoam, but there I have my little bag that I put it in because I knew there would be trash, and that little bag is very easy to carry. And then all of a sudden, okay, here's this piece of that, and you put it in the trash. That's how you get rid of the kilesas. So yellow, see, like the sun, mellow yellow with patience, body, speech, mind, quality, and activity. All of those things, yellow, to defeat passion and desire. Yeah, passion too. You can get too passionate about things. Passion comes up, a lot of it's anger, right? So there's a passion. Better to be patient. Think about it in 10 days. How important was it? Patience gets you to that yellow state. So Ni, like the Knights of Ni, patience, that yellow color, that's what defeats passion and desire. Ma, ethics, right? The color green, it has with compassion. You're being a judge, but you're judging kindly and compassionately for yourself and others, and not harshly and sadistically. But within reason, you can overdo any of these things. Ma is only good when the middle path is reached. You do have to deal with bad people and differently than with good ones. Om, generosity. It starts with generosity. Om, and it purifies pride and ego. Me, mine. Color is white. It is the realm of the devas. It's the symbol of wisdom. Om. See, it begins with wisdom, ends with wisdom. Hum. And inside, those are all antidotes. Antidotes against the kilesas. It's like a little case, a leather case that has them in it. But see, that can be updated to the modern version, and then you have that with you, and you have that one saying, Om Mani Padme Hum. And there you go. You keep bringing yourself back to the awareness of all of the importance of those things, and not the delusionary, distracting things, the ill will producing things. Well, why are you angry about it? Well, I'm focusing on it. Well, why can't you stop focusing on it? The alligator's not in the room, but you're thinking that it is. That's you. That's absolutely you. That's you misusing your optionality to focus on aggravating things versus things that bring you simple joys, achievable joys, like silence, a clean room where everything's organized and comfortable, and it's a place you could read a book or two, perhaps even sleep, and it would be comfortable, and you might have some things that make that possible. And when it happens, maybe a nice little fire is close, like something smart, like a can or something, some kind of metal contraption, like a wood stove that you can also cook on, and it's sort of small and maintainable kind of thing, but does a lot of stuff that you couldn't otherwise do, mind you, with a couple of other few things. So, and also Padme is means lotus. Lotus symbolizes wisdom. Purity must be achieved by an indivisible unity of method and wisdom, symbolized by the final syllable Hong, which indicates indivisibility. So you make it part of your essence over time. You let it dissolve, the wisdom dissolve. It takes time to metabolize wisdom. It's one of the priceless jewels of the Silk Road. Om Mani Padme Hum. Microenvironments, microenvironments, microenvironments. I'm going to say it 3 times so it can fit in or seep in or sink in. It's just about microenvironments. Where are you right now? Take a look around. Make that place as nice as you can, but it might just be changing forms and conditions. It might be very temporary. It could be just 5 minutes. Now, if you realize you can't take any type of executive kind of decision making, then don't do that. That wouldn't be appropriate. But if you can, then do that. That's what agency is about. Like, oh, there's a big pile of garbage in this place that I might have to be staying for 2 weeks, so I'm going to clear that out and up, and maybe I'll just sweep this floor, and it's all within your control. It's your microenvironment. It's not the whole wide world. It's not the country. It's not the epoch. It's not the neighborhood. It might not even be your house. It might not be your building. It might not be nothing but the place where you happen to be. See, the owner might be somewhere else. Like, he might be dead. Or he's on his plantation somewhere in another country. And he might just have some managers managing the managers. And it just so happens that for the next 5 days, you might have to be in a place. So you don't have to make it worse. Why would you make your microenvironment worse? Why would you make things worse for yourself or others around you? Why would you do that? Well, people do that. Why did they do that? Well, they're unskillful. But skillful people don't do that. Skillful people also don't create attachments with temporary things. That thing you built, it could be burnt down tomorrow. If you're attached to it, the suffering will be commensurate with your attachment. You're very attached, you will suffer very much. Not attached, you will not suffer at all. See the difference? But until that happens, you don't need to live under conditions that a human being can't take care of, like a sack of garbage thrown out of a moving vehicle for no reason whatsoever other than changing forms and conditions. You can see it with perfect neutrality. It's not an insult to you. It's not an insult to the planet. It's nothing bigger than things flying around in space. Just watch people in traffic. Look at that. This person going here, that person going there. None of them making any damn sense most of the time. You would ask to stop right there. Where are you going again? Oh, well, I've got this job. See this boulder? I push it uphill, and it's very important. Oh, yeah, sure. Then keep on. Hey, I don't want to stop you. Why would you want to stop someone that's thinking that way? But if you don't think that way, do you feel relief, or do you feel like you should be thinking that way? What would be the skillful thing to do? So people get caught up on people, places, and things. They get attached. Yes, they do. They get attached on their own concept of self. They have a self that they are attached to. They are attached to the image of their own self. I can't take that. I can't do that. I won't do that. How could they put it that way? That's how people get insulted. And essentially, they insult themselves based on attachments to a psychological mirage called self, a thing called I, which is, in a way, its own psychological microenvironment, isn't it? You thought that way yesterday. Today, you don't. Yesterday was bad weather. Today, it's perfectly fine. You act differently under different circumstances in your microenvironments, but you're always mindful about what skillfulness is vis-a-vis right view and right effort. The right effort might be, maybe this sack of trash should lay there because of some reason. Maybe you have some completely crazy fool that thinks that the trash should be right where it is. But you might not be in the vicinity of that fool for very long, but because of changing forms and conditions, you might have to be sitting there for 5 minutes. And that's just what you're going to do, because that's what skillful people do, because they're aware that they're not in control of every facet of this here bardo, i.e. dimension, one of them. But it can be very insightful. In fact, you can turn it into Tonga practice. This is aggravating to a self, a me, a level of perhaps unskillfulness, but let me observe that. Let me take that apart. Let me dissect that. Let me deal with that. Isn't it wonderful? It's just this little thing I'm dealing with. That just watch me being annoyed with this little thing for this little while. Isn't that nice versus being in the kalesis, swimming with the eels, being the aggravation, being the embodiment of it? There is no distinction between me and mine or it. Isn't that a whole new world? Isn't that how skillful practice is done? And just using these little absurdist moments, such as a damn fool insisting that I look at a trash bag for 15 minutes because of his rules in that microenvironment within a bardo of rapidly changing forms and conditions. Now, he wanted to make it longer, but it was strange. Something happened. Walked out on the street and changing forms and conditions. And then you could just get up and go. Just walked on by. Left the trash bag and everything else, and 5 minutes later, different micro environment. So it can be purely random like that, or you can give it a little bit of directionality, which is where would be a better place to go and why, and what is realistically better, and how is having optionality, like being able to pick up a trash bag and put it in a trash, or maybe use it, pick it up and put it for something else. If it's a clean one, that's something that you were given for free, weren't you? Can you come up with an idea for it that might be useful for you? Maybe you were holding 5 bananas. That trash bag blows straight in front of your feet. You pick it up. It's perfectly clean. You put the bananas in. You're comfortable now. You're more comfortable now. Everything's better now. Changing forms and conditions. Just on a micro environmental level. You can see it there. You can see it within your life. You can release yourself from attachments to changing forms and conditions and ideas, people, places, and things. Gives you that playful experimentation, that weightlessness, that distance from a thing called I, a thing called self. Brings a whole lot of whimsy into the situation. Lightness, playfulness, but also mindfulness. What is annoying you and why? But of course you're not looking to be annoyed, but when you are, you're like, okay, this is an opportunity to practice right now. I'm not going to put extras on it. I'm not going to throw fuel on the fire. I'm going to starve it out, but I'm going to watch it until it is extinguished, till it burns down to the cinders, and that little puff of smoke goes up, and you have that little thing called nibbana. Regarding the kilesas again and the three realms, remember that a lot of them are mixes. For example, greed is a word people think, well, I'm not greedy, but see, desirousness is enough. It's essentially the kilesa. So there's subtleties to that, and usually that's what leads to the other thing, such as ill will towards others. Because in your mind will flash an image of something you're desirous of, then you're aware you don't have it, but then you'll impute those things to people that do, and then that will create ill will towards them. In a way, that has a lot to do with class animosities. A certain subsection of it, which is completely avoidable if you skillfully practice and are skillfully mindful of how these things start going down into their roots and disabling them, because they are based on a delusion and illusion. For example, just because another human being might look physically attractive does not mean that it would be a good thing to have them around you or be in a relationship with them. Specifically, they might be very boring people that have a lot of demands and completely different ideas about life in general. Not to mention spiritual practice, but you think they're that based on delusion, which leads to desire, which leads to ill will towards others that might have what you think or misperceive to be desirable, when in fact, if you were to have it, you would regret it the minute you did. You see how we get caught then? See? It's a little metaphor for life. If you can see it that small, you can scale that up. And that can really encompass any and everything, not just in this Bardo, but all the Bardos to come. You can apply it to the hate-drenched leftoids that railed against the so-called bourgeoisie. And in terms of the Cultural Revolution, you have these idiots that just wanted to have the status and the say-so, and essentially kicked out or elbowed out the real thing. And what did everyone get? Well, they got the appearance of pseudo-intellectualism, but none of the realness of insight, which is essentially what an intellectual class should deliver, and not just have the pretense of being knowledgeable in things, when in fact that's not what an intellectual class is. It's other people see the outsider viewpoint, have that pretense. Well, they look smart, so I'm going to act like them. But once they pretend or try to do that, well, they really don't deliver, do they? But they wanted the position, they wanted the respect, they wanted the veneration, but they just didn't know what it takes to get there. They just didn't want the authenticity that they needed to do it. They thought that was some kind of arbitrary thing keeping them out because it was a projection from their side. That's how common, normal, vulgar people think, especially sliding towards the subnormal scale of things. You ever meet somebody like that? Well, I don't have to listen to what they have to say. Who do they think they are? Well, maybe what they're saying, it makes a whole lot of sense and you don't. But they don't see it that way because of subnormal narcissistic conceit, for example. So what do you think the causality of that wrong view is going to be? Is it going to be right things or wrong things? Think about that. Regarding Kalesa combinations, let's return to doubt. Doubt has the delusional or illusionary aspect of appearing to be wise. Doubt always has wise arguments or arguments you should listen to. That's the delusional aspect of doubt. Whereas real wisdom is the acceptance that nothing is certain and that all is changing forms and conditions. And to that extent, unpredictable, beyond human comprehension, accepting that, accepting the here now, the moment as reality, and not intellectual projections or realistic projections or probable projections, and then vis-a-vis one's position towards that, such as imagining nightmarish, doomerish scenarios for eternity versus not doing that. Just on the basis of the absolutely true principle of nothing is certain. Your projections aren't certain. Just because you can project them does not mean that they are certain. So why treat them with the importance as if they were? Well, I believe it's probable. Well, that's a wrong belief. It's a wrong view. But I feel. It's so realistic. It's like being in a film. I can see it so clearly. It's going to happen this way. No, it's not. That's the illusionary aspect of it. And the more compelling that is, the deeper that root is in you, the more suffering, the more aggravation, the more fear, the more disgust, and the more misinterpretation you're going to be open to, such as concluding, well, my life is a mistake. Right? I doubt that this realm makes any sense at all. I doubt that I can make any sense of it at all. I doubt that it's worthwhile, right? And on and on and on. That's what people get into. And essentially they talk themselves further and 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 further into wrong view. So you have to catch yourself doing it. You have to say it's not certain. You have to stop that train. You have to jump off that train of thought. I like that, a dramatic metaphor. There's trains of thought, right? Well, you got to jump off that one. Like, oh, wait a second, look, I'm going the wrong way. There's no other way than to jump off, so, right? Do the sign of the cross in between cars with your parachute on. And when you come to the bridge, jump off and pull the cord. It's not preferable. It's not what you wanted to do, but you're on the wrong damn train. That's right view, and then right effort. and then you're off that train. No, your life is not a mistake. Your life is meaningful. Attainment of right view and right effort, they're very meaningful. They are meaningfulness du jour. Okay? But it's a here now kind of reality. It's not then there. It's not a what if. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's a lived reality, one breath at a time, free of delusion, free of ill will, free of desire. Living in a subnormal world is that not the price of conceit? Or is that just dissatisfaction dressed up in raiments, throwing smoke and dust around itself, making it look like glitter, making it feel like it's worth it, and yet the net effect is the same. Just an ocean of dissatisfaction with the here now if one is stuck in wrong view like that. So everybody wants the perfect life, but you open your front door, it's not the same way it was yesterday. And it's not meant to be. And it's also not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be dynamic. Imagine a video game where it's just do. It's too boring. Why do people read literature? It's not because... Now, look, a lot of people are reading the worst literature ever produced. So there is no modernity to speak of, just neo-barbarianism. But there are great books from the past that curated people know are perhaps worth reading, but not if they mislead you in a wrong direction. A lot of people, oh, this sounds so appealing. Let me try that out, but you can't just try out bad things and not get the bad karma associated with it because it's sticky like that. And sometimes the karmic debt is way higher because a few dumb things happen in dumb causality together and you misunderstood the precipice that we stand on as human beings in this dimension. We can fall down just as much as we can lift ourselves up to loftier heights. It's not about taking away other people's stuff. It's about being content with what you have. Being aware that even if you only experience one good thing, one good day, one good hour, one good minute, then it was worth it that you were born. It was worth it that you had the chance to improve yourselves and let ill will and false conceptions of the past go, which are delusional and ideological and distributed at this time. This is the antidote to that. So take it, and it might take a while to sink in. And it might take a while to work with it. You could develop symptoms and become ill or depressed, or you're going to be battling the inner dragons called Kalisa that also have Kami. Om Mani Padme Hum. Say that 3 times. And then deepen your understanding of each syllable and associate it with each one a rune. But choose wisely. That's what the Hum part is, before you even go further, stop with whom. Is it wise? Is it a kilesa? Is it desire? Is it attraction? Why are things attractive? Why does the deer go, see my comedy routine started. Why does the deer go to the attractive decoy? The deer are my friends, and every time I see them from a different angle and under different circumstances, sometimes in the pitch dark, sometimes when it's raining, sometimes when it's the bright noonday sun, but you usually don't see them then, do you? But they're there. If you can smell them, you know where. So, yeah, attractiveness. We can be attracted to bad things. The deer can be decoyed. And the decoy has to be realistic enough to fool one of those damn creatures. And we've got public relations specialists that have sold us every bad idea known to man, on top of just junk. Look at people's garages full of junk. They got sold on something they didn't need. And now it's a burden. The object of life or happiness is not just buying things. But it's understandable that industrial production related people wanted people that were attuned to the production lines that they had capitalized in or invested in. But of course, they invested in things they thought would be good for those. Let's not impute ill will to people who made decisions post the Industrial Revolution so frivolously. It's potential that there were side effects that were not foreseen, and then not necessarily the leadership to get them out of it. And so compound problems manifested and were not adequately addressed, leading to failure, even to electricity grids level, civilizational level, a reduction to rubble and the people who preside over what's left. Because that's what's at sort of the bottom of human development. Now, this is not to say that people don't live normal lives in quotation marks, but it could have been a lot better had they solved those problems in a strategically sustainable, congruent with humanistic principles, because we're all human, we're social animals. So why can't we wish all creatures well? And then also do the same for ourselves without any kind of accusatory atmosphere amongst peers and visionaries and engineers and technicians that not only know how to destroy the world, but also know how to make a better one. Who wants to destroy the world? Raise your hand. Look, friend, you're in a bad way. I understand you might have those feelings, but you have to work your way out of seeing things that way. No matter what it was or what it is that's holding you to that viewpoint, it is pure poison. I'm not from your neighborhood. I can still tell you that it's true. But see, you can only depersonalize things if you can get out of your neighborhood of your mind. Get to an airport, the equivalent, right? And fly over the problems, but not in any direction necessarily, because there is no direction in this dimension. We live, we die. Old age and sickness is in between. Where are your expectations at? Do you have a roof over your head and some food and something, some people that aren't crazy around you, that might even be good or worthy or venerable? Well, you're blessed. you really do need to count your blessings instead of curse what you don't have, because then you would be missing the point of this life, this dimension, this challenge, to overcome the true adversaries of the good life, which are the kilesas and the three realms. And putting in the work personally by personally depersonalizing, until there's nothing of any kind of stain upon you or dead snake hanging around your neck, that it's clean. And that you develop psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, but in a skillful way that bring you long-term results that aren't necessarily in line with what so-called social expectations are in a propagandistic environment run by people that are not close to even ethical or enlightened. But you don't have to look at what they're producing. You can just tune out, right? Tune into the chitta, tune out of the noise. There you go. Put that on a t-shirt and send me the royalties. You're a capitalist, do that. But then make sure all that money goes to a good cause with good management, not just the pretense of being good. Because if the results aren't good, the organization isn't good, the ideas aren't good, the people aren't good. That's the causality of the situation. So causality can go in so many directions. That's why scientists love it. See, a lot of people hear karma and they think of lights and incense and candles. But people like Sherlock Holmes, causality is something that is something they really do understand. They do value it. Like a chemist, what is a chemist without causality? What, inert elements? So, but you can get those combinations wrong, and when you do, it's deadly. It blows up in your face. It turns into acid, becomes something harmful for human existence, just like the thoughts and kilesas do. Causality. But bring 2 good, 3 good, 4 good things together, and you get an even better thing, like paraffin. What a great, great, great thing that is. It's completely safe. Chemically, it is non-reactive. And look at its uses. It waterproofs, and you can burn it. You can use it for light. You can use it for candles. That's what they do. And yet you could eat it, and it would go through your body. And now, mind you, some candles are coated. I'm talking about the chemically pure version of it. You could put it into pills and swallow it, go through your body, and nothing would take place chemically. And we know this because we have scientifically established causality in these matters. Based on observation. See, sati, awareness? Every scientist in the world is based on causality. I produced this part to the 7 millionths. Now I have to establish that fact by applying the causality of the calipers to the object and measuring in a very precise way to get a very precise reading, because if anything was off, it would create its own causality that would lead to inaccurate assessments. So do you see how the one and the other seem to be very closely related? In fact, they're the same thing. So, but what is good in the eye of the beholder who is beholden by kilesas? Well, we know what that looks like now. And the causality of it is not good. But should such people become influential, well, then we see a causality on a social level. As above, so below. Individually, the same thing can happen. personality-wise? Should you degenerate into a hateful, greedy, delusional person? Then the results that come of that are bad decision-making that leads to bad results, which is a loop, which draws people in like a black hole, especially very good people that are innocent and could have been doing fascinating things, making astounding breakthroughs and living astoundingly well and healthily and happily and freely with humanistic, realistic humanistic principles, not the fake version of that. And doing things differently versus what the doomer loop that we're supposed to be in but don't need to be in if we use optionality, and harvest a good causality based on that. That's all. That's the opposite of destroying the world, isn't it? At least in a social sense, like a civic sense, like the sense in which I was brought up in, whose culture I represent as the chief representative of it, at least a new version of it, a refurbished version of it, which keeps all the good things but loses all the bad things, all the misguided things, and all the hateful, delusional, and greedy things. How about that? But in a fair humanistic way, where possible. But understanding this dimension is as it is, not as one would have it. But just like in the medical profession, if you know what's ailing you, then you can make reasonable incisions to limit the damage that certain structures may be causing at any given moment at time for any reason that need not be important but is discernible. That's it. You see, the neutrality part, it also appeals to scientists as well, for good reason. Imagine if they were personally invested in a narrative about chemistry. It has to be this way because so I imagine the world to be so. They're putting themselves and their theories and their egos in the way of reality. It's that depersonal, this principle. So it's as neutral as 1 + 1. Who's 1 and who's 2? Who cares? Nobody cares. You see, but see, in chemistry, they do care. Like, for example, if you take gold and you mix it with something else and then it dissolves it, people want to know how they can change it back to the solid form. So they're going to work that chemistry through and maybe do small tests and things of that nature. And if the results aren't good, they're not going to continue to do things the way they hypothesized would have been the right way, but turned out to be the wrong one. So how is it that in human affairs we don't seem to be able to update our programming to see things the way I just described, but socially and interpersonally as well? Why not? Just try it for 5 minutes. And then go back to the way you were thinking, and then think 5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes every hour, the way I described. If you are able to obtain it by cutting away your kilesas and giving yourself the infinite free room you need in order to contemplate such things at depth, sanely and not insanely, which is how a lot of people are living these days, which is why they're so miserable and why they are taking too many drugs, because they're miserable. And so it's a doom loop as well. So how can people get back to feeling better about themselves, their culture, their history, and their societies if you have people that don't seem to understand how to make that happen in a realistic and humane way, and not in an ideologically bizarre way. Some kind of tyrannically sadistic way, per definition. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out here. I have no chance of making this a reality, as I am a pauper. But surely there's some deep pockets out there that wants to bet on the next better thing than the way this thing turned out. Maybe some people are willing to wing it, like a wing and a prayer, and just see what happens, just because it really could only go up from here now, knowing what we do about these things. Having digested it at length and just came to the rational conclusion that one was deluded and can cease and desist with all that kind of three-realm activity, individually and socially, so that we can start experiencing more heavenly abode-like conditions, individually and socially, and so on and so forth, that it's congruent with the principle of that. So who would be against that? Per definition, who? Good people? And what do you do with good people and bad people? Do you have that figured out in your mind yet? Because part of the heavenly abodes is being around people who are wiser, not dumber than you. That's when things are really working well. But if all people can't be that or didn't become that, that's not really the problem of the good people, is it? Unless it's made that way by bad people. Ain't that the truth? But again, what about property management? You can have bad property management, new management comes in, it becomes a great building again. It becomes a great neighborhood again. It becomes to be a great country again. Great state, great city again. Great company again. Great family again. Anything can get better with these principles, which is why they're good. It's not God telling you this necessarily, although by all means, friends, if Brahma gets you to where I just described, am I going to be the one to mess up that relationship, tell you to doubt? Or would I tell you have faith instead? In Brahma, in the life force, in the big bright light, wisdom, philosophers, sort of related, but people got problems. Personally, with how God is depicted or some such thing, that is just nonsense nobody needs to hear. Downing God or a God or gods, that's not in the heavenly realms. It feels so good having faith in Brahma or the light or insight or wisdom or wise people, in sages or bodhisattvas or monks or bhikkhus or samana. Isn't it wonderful that they exist somewhere? That you can read the definition and they defined it. So this realm is not all bad, this dimension is not all bad, so don't put your focus and locus there. Put it in the good. Put it in the good. It seems so simple to say it, but that's like putting it on black when you know black's going to win every time. Right? Imagine there's a roulette wheel and you have that 50-50, red, black. Let's just say it's red. The table's wobbly, and because of that, the ball will strike red 75% of the time. You're going to put on red every time, aren't you? That's causality. You're betting on goodness. That doesn't mean you're going to win every time, but goodness is good every time. And over time, it adds up. That's why we call it good. That's how the whole thing got started. So discovering the good or rediscovering the good or refocusing on the good, that's where things need to go. That's the direction to take. And that really doesn't matter who you are or where you are or your background story or what you did and didn't do or what people did and didn't do for you. It has nothing to do with that, you see. That principle lives to serve the practitioner every time. You can get there, but you have to get over that self. And that self is formidable. They call it the shadow, essentially. It's getting through the concept of self, or a limiting self, or a berating self, or a neurotic self, or a fearful self, or all of those things at different degrees that would keep you from samadhi, which would be liberation as well. Because if you're liberated from stomach pain or psychological torturous kinds of things, then you've got all the time in the world suddenly. Wow, I before I was washing my hands furiously, and now I don't ever do that. My hands, they have a light coconut oil on them. And I can touch all different types of things because in the jungle things are generally pretty clean, although not everything. You know, there's birds in the trees and they do their business, and then you get a coating of things coming down through canopies. But that all can be mitigated. It's not psychologically poisonous like in cities or social environments that are flip or sadistic or ideological or hateful or misinformed about history or agitated about this or that to be hateful to these people for what reasons again? Reasons some square head, some cardboard box head came up with, and a bunch of people who pretended to be an intelligentsia, like, oh yeah, of course, you got to believe that. Anybody off narrative's a hater. How extremely hateful and destructive would a water army like that be? And could you have been bamboozled for a time? Well, if so, walk yourself baby step wise out of it. Clean yourself off and redeem yourself my moment at a time so that we can all enjoy this fabulous dimension, this ever so civil society that we can enjoy in the world at this time without getting offended about that, but rather appreciating that on the deepest of levels. The very deepest of levels. Like you thought you could just hit the floor, but you just kept breaking through those barriers, keeping you back from seeing things in a new way, a holistic, sustainable, healthy, wholesome way. But again and again and again with right effort and right view every time. Corrective measures via personal responsibility. It's your life. It's your opportunity. Don't waste it. I have nothing bad to say. See, in the past, I used to have a lot of bad things to say, but that's not skillful. And you do get bad karma from that. It's just bad results. So if you can put it in a neutral way that isn't personal, I think that's the better way to do it. Because people change also. And not all groups are monolithic. So if you're going to be a humanist, you might understand that there's a lot of common ground with good people that can still be different, right? Together, but also apart. And there need not be a big stink about it if people decide this and that amongst themselves. I know they did it in Namibia for a while because there were different settlers there. You know, Africa is one of the biggest continents there on the planet. There's Arabs, there's Indians. It's very ethnically diverse. There's all different types of different tribes. Imagine if we just said yellow people for all Orientals. Koreans are the same as Thai. Thai is the same as Japanese and all that. Black people are the same way. They got different tribes. In fact, they probably don't know to what tribe they belong. But they could probably figure that out now. And that would be fascinating. And the people in Africa are living great. So long as they can in most places. Now, some places not so much, based on whatever's going on, changing forms and conditions. They used to trade with the British Empire, and now they're trading with China. Big change. Also big numbers. There used to not be very many people, now there are. Big change. But they're all damn different. And the continent is immense, so where is this monolithic kind of way of thinking? Just because you belong to a group, you have to think a certain way because you belong to a group. Why can't you be different? Right? Why can't you be an individual first and maybe not of a group, especially bad ones or ones that are misguided or all the way down to the personal level? It doesn't matter what country you're in. What's your neighborhood like? What is your house look like? Okay? And even a neighborhood can be organized one way or the other way. It could be two houses down the street. It could be in the middle of the street. It could be one house. It could be three. But everyone's just trying to get by, skillfully or unskillfully, with a lot of unnecessary suffering or not so much suffering. In fact, maybe no suffering outside of old age and sickness and death. But no unnecessary kind of agitation, insults, greed, ill will, or delusion. Oh, I want what he has. None of that. It's you're happy. He has his, you have yours. You don't have a lot. He probably doesn't have a lot, but if he did, he doesn't want your stuff. You're happy for him if he's doing well. That's the way to be around people that feel the same way because they got there via their own personal right effort and right view and right persistence. And that's what keeps them there too. And those, why would you say they aren't valuable people when that's the definition of being a valuable person versus the opposite of that? What person here, I don't care what you look like, can listen to what I just said and deny that what I said was true? So it's all this personalization or the personalization process, the big ego process that is leading to these impasses personally and socially, that one cannot come to amicable agreements with different kinds of people that live in different kind of ways. And that's okay. Now, I don't want to talk about Haiti and Dominica necessarily, but Dominica seems to be better organized and live better than the alternative. So what do you think if they put it to a vote? Would the majority of Haitians vote for a Dominican system or their own system based on democratic principles? Who would win that vote? Just saying that, imagine they could, in an alternative reality, implement the right policy. Would they at least vote for the people? they wanted the right policy, or do you deny them agency? Do you deny them common sense? But why can't they do it? Why are they hindered? Who is hindering them? Can they change their minds? Can they be on board? Can they become different people? Or must they go to an early grave? Because they aren't worth the price of everything else not working, even if they think so, and have a few people that believe them versus everyone else. So that's why the political process, it really is real, even if people think it is fake. And that's the way it should look, to make the better decisions for the most amount of people. At reducing aggravation, such as, you know what, when we drive on this road and there's all these potholes, we all wreck our cars, so let's pitch together and make the road great again. Or make it better than it's ever been before. And then look at that. Every time people are going back and forth on that road, it's just such a lovely experience. It's so smooth. When it rains, it doesn't turn into a swamp. When it's snowy, it's still very firm. And when it's sunny, it's just a pleasure to drive on. It's smooth. And everybody's benefiting from it. No car is jostling because that asphalt is perfect. It's perfect for trucks. It's perfect for small cars. It's perfect for bicycles. Especially if, imagine there's 3 lanes and they're very far apart from each other. And the trucks go in one lane, the cars go in another, and the bicycles, they have their own lane. But that black asphalt, it's so smooth. It's so professional. The geometry is right for the centrifugal forces kind of thing. And the foundation is right. So it's not just going to look nice when you cut the ribbon on it, but it's going to stay nice too because you did the scientific analysis of the soil structures and beyond that, above and beyond material selection. But of course it was achievable too, because finally you might have gone with slate chips because it was available instead of some other granulate that you would have used in different locations kind of thing. And yet still the principles of constructing a road are applicable. But of course we have variables. And so we come back to the engineers. Yeah, the engineers are on board. And they can do it professionally, as everyone expects, and also personally, as everyone would wish for them. To build their lives in such a way that they enjoy living, but the right way with the right view and the right effort. Coming back to the idea of microenvironments. Look, microenvironments are very small, and they can get smaller, all the way down to 1 meter. I think personal space is sort of the lower end of the spectrum, but I've been in buses and in different traveling situations, trains, where my personal space was not respected, and I still managed to get through it with astounding levels of decorum and patience based on practices that I developed, which, had I not, would not have been what happened, would not have been what manifested themselves, versus all these damn fools out there losing their minds because they're so damn unskillful and get the tail end of what this dimension can serve up to them in the form of lived experiences that people could have even predicted would have, with 100% assurity, caused more suffering than it was worth. You want to be one of those types of people? People should be a little bit more afraid. I think people today, modern neo-barbarians, they're sort of primed to be really naive about immorality when the effects of it are worse than death. Because you're living horribly. And that's due to those three realms. So technically you might not be unhealthy, but mentally you are. I recently became aware of a male model. You know, a young man, looks fresh, healthy. He should be feeling great, but no, he has an opioid addiction because of his feeling of mental anguish or suffering that is not real, except in a psychological sense, that is very real, very compelling, very decisive in determining a negative outcome, causally, karmically for him personally, because he's lacking just the basic skills like detachment and returning to the breath and right view and right effort, essentially. Just that. But it's so much easier to take a pill, especially if you get into the habit of it, and that's what makes it addictive, and then you need it every day, and you don't need to be a rocket science to figure out that that's no way to live. So how do other people who suffer tremendously, especially HSPs out there, please have some compassion on yourself, suffer perhaps 10,000 times more than your standard pedooge, although let's not do that, right? Like, let's not acclaim ourselves to be something special because we suffer more. That's a rather strange conceit, isn't it? Let's just say the potential of suffering seems to be more than others, but perhaps it's not. Perhaps there's more sensitive people than you that really are suffering from neuroses. And we've seen these people, and we can thank God we're not these people, but we might be close to these people in our own way, which is not skillful, and that's where we need to manifest the practice more to keep ahead of these neuroses. Such as, how about people that were just drop dead gorgeous when they were young, but as they get older, they fall apart. But they were very vain, they were very attached to their appearance. Look at the unnecessary suffering people like that have, that base their whole value on how they look. Old age is very difficult for them, psychologically. But with these techniques, they can live a better life because they can forgive themselves for being attached to appearances, because that's a mammalian thing to do. It's a peopling this planet kind of basic mistake. But the good news is you can dispense with it. You can put it behind you by adopting a new right view, such as old age. The Buddha went through it. A lot of venerable teachers, every venerable teacher went through it. Where's Bodhidharma right now? I heard he's walking with his one shoe back home. But other people said he already died. But when they rolled open the great jade boulder, they found that his body had gone, but there was one shoe there. Now, as far as cultural things go, for people that are truly cultural, realize that it's not normal to care about the things that you do. The normal thing is not to care. It's very rare To be cultural, be culturally significant, be representative of the culture, be determinant of the culture, it's very rare. And it's not something you should necessarily strive to do. The pseudo-intellectual class, they take it over as a political act. And then just free ride. And that's where all the cynicism comes from. They don't know what they're doing. They're basically making paper airplanes and throwing them at their cubicles, most of them. Just have an auspicious kind of sounding thing they do that they don't really do because it's for social media or something, or for passing acquaintances, but not because they're cut out for the role. So it's not something you can just snap your fingers into existence. And just the horrific kind of cultural management of the last 30 years of infamy does not speak for the lineage that we're dealing with in many places, where normalcy led to complacency, which led to what we have now, which might as well be rock bottom as far as I'm concerned. But you know, there's so many people with such a high tolerance for bad culture, apparently. Nobody's noticed. So what I'm saying is, don't have the expectation that you will find people even remotely like you during your journey through this dimension. Now, if you do, great. They do exist. Like I said, there are at least 1 million noble souls, I think, at any one given time on this planet. Like, don't look at the super exceptional people. Let's look a little bit lower. You know, people who pick up trash and don't throw it, for example. People who plant trees. People engaged in the sciences, usually. Engineers, come on. Building bridges. If that thing falls down, they're going to have big problems because they do have accountability in their lives. So they're going to put in right effort because they have to, because they're accountable. But that's not so in culture, is it? You have one bomb performance after the next because of bad management. It just continues on. The people that do that have enough money to afford a loss, but they really do like the conceit of being in cultural circles they don't belong to. So that's where you get the stagnation. That's where you get these people that really think much of themselves, and then the echo chambers that back them up. When they're awful, like on every level, just completely awful, like not even a bit of it good kind of pretenses. So that is the situation in 2024, at least. So in 100 years, I'm hoping people will have chilled out enough to just have admitted that fact. But in the day when it's happening, you've got big egos that won't accept that on any level. Not on any level, mind you, like not even a little bit. Because otherwise they would look as slapdash ridiculous as they actually are, which they're not prepared to do on any level either. But, you know, changing forms and conditions, maybe young people that haven't ossified into such monstrous gestalts, they might have a chance of adopting a few new things and making the changes that lead to success in a better future than the present we have today. Now, if the thought of a cultural blob of bureaucrats does not make you queasy, nauseous, the thought of it, just realize, yes, why not? That vain people would then hog positions that they thought were socially valuable Just like stealing whatever jewelry might be in a jewelry store if they can gain access to it, but not being jewelry themselves, just the floor walker that might have bribed a security guard, who knows, came through the back door, not through the front. So it happens in buildings, it happens in parks, changing forms and conditions. It happens in literature. There you go. A lot of people got some juicy literature out of all these unskillful ways of thinking and acting that people call normalcy today, but will look like abnormalcy in 20 years, I'm sure. But we need to get there first. I've gotten there in my mind, but why not as above, if so below? But for it to become a popular movement, more people need to think and feel that way and act that way, and not like today. But you see, I would have to stop short of making any kind of personal attacks. I think even bringing it down to the year. I just use the year as an engineer would use a utility, because I know it's already passed. It will be history sooner than you think. And the only people worth listening to, or that are worth a damn that will listen to this, will hear it in the future. Because they were all deaf, dumb, and blind, most of them, in my time. But perhaps blinded would be the right term. They didn't have any reason to be that, but became that via their own kalesis. But let the scales fall off the eyes of civilization. And let us do the good things, despite the bad things, and do it one mind moment at a time. Coming back to the monk's practice of looking straight ahead or down, that is not to be underestimated. Some people might think that's extreme, or you're losing your situational awareness or something. Look, that might be so in extremely dangerous places, but you might also be overestimating how dangerous a place might be. Why? If there's any type of questionable thing, just think of when you were in your most questionable kind of situation. Maybe you locked yourself out of the door and you only had your shorts on, and somebody walked by and gave you a strange look, but it was completely innocent. Just give people the benefit of the doubt if you happen to see something screwy. And see it that way, don't follow it. And also, again, aversion is a big problem. And ugly people, they like to make themselves look even uglier to get attention. So averting one's eyes or not looking everywhere is a skill and a practice, and you should use it, because then you're not bothered by ridiculous things that want to make themselves uglier or more obnoxious than they need to be. You're not interacting with aversion. For God's sake, anything but that. That is the worst. So are there trolls? Yes, there are. That's the whole point, but they're everywhere. There's visual, cultural, individual trolls, and they want the spotlight. They want their bad music playing at the DJ's table. You go up to talk to them, hey, change it to classical music. No, they have the venue kind of people. So it's the same kind of culture jamming activity that they engage in, social jamming, class jamming, whatever they can jam, they'll jam it. They'll trash it, they'll make it a worse kind of place because they're there kind of people. That's subnormalcy. Then insist on being there too. So that's, again, what usually, let's say, door security takes care of. Like, hey, guess what? You don't look right, and so you don't act right, and so you're denied entry. Now, the problem is when, again, people do not respect boundaries. People don't come into your house. They don't need to come into your neighborhood either, unless they have a reason for being there. Like they have the right citizenry-ness. Legal precedents and all that versus the opposite of that, anarchy. Can we agree to that? I know good society can, but a bunch of numbnut pseudo-intellectuals don't seem to see eye to eye on that, but also want to be controlling your administration or politics. They're just unqualified for the job. They don't have the right, their hearts and minds and everything else ain't in the right place. They might be getting paid from someone else kind of people. But they sure have a sly story. Or they say they're on your side, but then the enforcement isn't there, kind of flip like that. They say what you want to hear, but then they don't deliver. And there's a lot of disdain these people have because they're trying to pull a fast one, essentially. They know what they're doing. They just think you're too stupid to see what they're doing, kind of people. The political charlatan or operative. So I know some people thought they didn't exist, but you see lobbying and working for third parties that are not in the interest of the company, there's a Venn diagram and there's a certain segment of them that will do both. So if you have some of those doing some of these things, then the results are going to be predictably bad or are predictably bad because that's what's in play. So now you know. And look, vetting political office, very important. And so if you've had a culture of failure, you need to reinvigorate it to be successful. Otherwise, you don't have a culture. You have some kind of occupation and not a good one. A social occupation, a venue occupation, a psychological occupation. If you're thinking about terrible things. So think about the one good thing you saw during whatever foray through a village or your life. Try to not get caught into ugliness and aversion, but rather, wait a second, how about that one moment when the sun was reflecting off that surface at that angle? Introduce the photographic mind. Even if it's just as a professional or as an amateur, what were the lighting conditions and could you have framed that shot this way, even if you don't have a camera with you? But if you have one, most people have one, you can snap a shot and then you can create a collection of the good things and you can also come back to them and make like an album and relive those moments instead of terribly disappointing, oppressive, and hideous moments that are also interspersed into this dimension to greater or larger degrees, depending on where you are, at what time. But of course, it could also be an awfulization mechanism as well. If you're an HSP who might have eccentric tastes that everyone need not understand or share either, it doesn't matter. It's about basic humanity and compassion towards yourself, even if you're living in sadistic kinds of conditions, to not make that situation worse by seeing it in a worse way or over-focusing on the hideous and grotesque nature of certain things that may surround you at times, and often it's just your awfulization that is the most grotesque thing. And because you have agency, you can dispense with that, and then you can return to a zero level of neutrality and say, hey, look, you're doing the whole city a net benefit. Think of the people that won't see the trash because you cleared it away. You're not in a personal relationship of animosity with the person that threw it, who likely didn't do it intentionally. It was an accident or the wind blew. And look, you get to share maybe a moment of carelessness with them as you correct that karmically and direct it into the trash where it belongs, just like kilesas or bad thoughts. And so it's a philosophical exercise. It's not some kind of a prisoner's dilemma or some kind of perpetual offense. But it's just that drop by drop compassion for even wayward people, that you help them out karmically while helping yourself visualize the process. As well as experiencing the results. The street that you cleared up yesterday with 3 trash bags, it stays that way mostly. I mean, there might be an outbreak over the weekend or something, but it's a lot less than if you had done nothing. The whole place would be completely ransacked, trashed. And so you see, it's just like this Bardo. Perfection isn't really the thing, but changing forms and conditions are. And that teaches you that. It teaches you that deed by deed by deed, by my moment, by awareness, by the metaphor over and over and over and over again, until the metaphor sort of takes over and you can say, well, I threw away at least 1,000 bags of even small litter from my microenvironment. What is the psychological equivalent of that? Here's another thought exercise. How many people walk by the thing that you consider to be offensive? And then just imagine if nobody ever walked by, or you didn't even walk by it. That you were at a riverbank and the river took it and put it on the side of the bank that you happened to be walking by. Why wouldn't it annoy you then, but it annoys you when people are walking around that can be caught up in some carelessness, when in fact they're contributing to your carefulness? Because if everything was perfect, you couldn't practice that way, which is good karma, not just because it is, but it's the psychological part that helps compassion. You cultivate compassion instead of enmity. You cultivate understanding for carelessness, but not the imitation or proliferation of it in the form of aggravation, agitation, blame. Because you can depersonalize it. You didn't see the person who directly threw it or dropped it on the ground, so you don't have to take it personally. You don't have to create a personal attachment or aversion with a figment of your imagination. Now, do you? But if you catch yourself doing that, then you can catch yourself in the whole process, which can be applied to other things that might appear to be more important than that thing. And so it's a little micro austerity, isn't it? That gives you a perspectionist kind of insight into how these things work, knowing what you know about the kilesas and the 3 realms, which is very instructive, is it not? You might even want to seek out a place that has trash so that you can do this practice and not be on a farm, for example, where that never happens. So you couldn't do that practice. Although on a farm it could happen to a certain extent, so it's not like it's impossible. But in a big city where there's a lot of careless people who are living poorly, you can see a lot of carelessness in the form of litter, can't you? There's also probably a relationship just with frequency. If 1,000 people come through, there's going to be litter. So a city center is essentially a place where a lot of people move through, so you just need to have basic maintenance and you don't need to awfulize anything. It's just a mathematical probability that, again, 10,000 people are going to leave litter in some form. So in a way, if you have litter, it's a sign that your city is being trafficked at least, and is serving as some kind of potential conduit for better things. Even if it's trashed at the moment, you can change the management to perhaps put a more of a focus on such things, so that if you do have a trash problem, maybe it's a party town. It's a lot of partying going on, like Amsterdam, so there's a lot of carelessness, but it's a fun place, but they don't neglect the maintenance, which keeps everything fun. And they have specialists dedicated to the matter so that everybody doesn't have to do it themselves and possibly get angry about it, instead of doing the practice like I said. But yes, some places are poorly managed, others aren't, changing forms and conditions. Some places you could organize something, other places you can't. Maybe it's something you could recommend to the proper people instead of complaining about it. Come up with a few solutions instead of just being angry every time about essentially mismanagement and not individual careless people, whoever they might be. So you might also be in a microenvironment of limited opportunity, or your schedule might limit you. You might be working at different times than other people. You might not be in synchronicity with the rest of the people, but that's okay. Actually, that's to your advantage, because a lot of people are not doing things skillfully at this time. Or normally, people aren't skillful, really. Just to an average degree, if that means anything to someone who's practicing a supernormal practice, the difference can be vast. So don't expect to find coherence, sanity, or opportunities necessarily, but over time, because you have an internal focus, you don't have an external focus, you might come into some opportunities that might work for you specifically, but also don't need to be the end-all, be-all of satisfaction. It's probably going to be a mixed bag. But because you can take or leave certain things, and you're not looking for some kind of recognition or acceptance on the basis of something that people couldn't do anyway, then you don't have those unrealistic expectations, and you can just do some simple thing like gardening and not let yourself get drawn into any kind of drama or nonsense. You can be polite and also skillfully distant if that is what the situation requires. And there's no compunction to get along with others necessarily when you have a specific task which you're doing, which also might be work related. Like, this is your job. How about this? You would pick up trash because it's your job. It's not a statement. It's not personalized. It's just what you do. So if a truck driver drives by and threw a whole lunch crate out the window, you would clean that up. It's just the same if a priest did that. And probably would never know the reason why or who or how. But you're just going to get rid of it anyway, because nobody needs to see that mess. And so you can take care of that mess internally, externally, disassociatedly, but also practically, and be in congruence with the practice externally and internally, and not make it an issue or a bone of contention or anything else. When you go to a workplace, you should not be sharing your personal business. You don't know those people other than they need a job too, probably, i.e. enough money to live. And that's it. Anything above and beyond that could be pure conjecture and fantasy on your part, especially where civility, dignity, and respect come in. You got people that work low-level jobs because they are low-level. But that doesn't make low-level jobs unimportant. It just means a lot of them aren't being done right by people who aren't right. But you could be the exception. You could be a high-level person doing a low-level job and not think a thing about it other than, isn't this practice wonderful? Because it's a metaphor for the internal practice, which is decluttering the mind and soul, one wrapper at a time, one piece of garbage at a time, one kalisa at a time. And then if you're getting your ego involved via outcome dependence, you have to revert back to outcome independence. It really doesn't matter if you are allowed or have the opportunity to pick up 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of trash per day. If the consensus is that that's not desired in your area, then don't insist on doing it. Like, okay, we got people here that value trash more than trash collection, so isn't this dimension fascinating? Isn't it also full of changing forms and conditions? And okay, here it stays trash. That's the little trash land. You could go through it like a Disney park or amusement park and say, wow, look, the whole place would look like this. Or my microenvironment would look like this if I did nothing like this. Why isn't that's instructive too, isn't it? So there's no way you can lose with this practice. But if you are noticing ego engagement, it's likely due to some kind of outcome dependence instead of true neutrality and outcome independence. Coming back to the practicality of outcome independence, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Like, really feel that statement. Say it again and again. It doesn't matter. Was it meant to be? See it in a fatalist way. You got silver in the Olympics. Maybe it's for literature or the literature of your mind, the Olympics of your mind. That's good enough. Externals don't really matter, but your attitude, it absolutely does. And look, people are like, it's ephemeral. You should just have a good attitude. How about how to get to a good attitude? How do you get there? Well, that's for you to figure out. The good news is there are ways to get there, but the bad news is you have to put in the effort. But the good news is who else is going to put in the effort for you to change your attitude other than you? So it's basic mammalian responsibility, compassion towards one's own psychology and its development in wholesome ways, such as reducing your contentment back to nothing. You can meditate all day long, all week long, all month long, and it's still meaningful. You might be going through immensely traumatic, genocidal kinds of memories, dissatisfactions, who knows what overblownness your particular karmic viewpoint will put on or spin on things, but that is not determinate in the end because you nip it in the bud. And just like when fishing, you throw your hook in. If you don't get a bite every time, it doesn't matter. That's not what the art of fishing is. It must bite every time you throw it in. No, that's the whole point. Life would be too boring if that was the case. There would be no challenge in it. There would be no skill in it. It would just be called grab a fish by the mouth and a hook practice, which would be off-putting, most likely. Not necessarily that Buddhists are into fishing because they don't injure the fish that way, but what they do catch is good thoughts. And they dine on those gourmet, naturally grown organic treats that are very nourishing over long periods of time, and they don't require the externals that other people require to feel right about their externals, if that makes any sense. So once you come down to zero or revert back to zero or have a meaningful life, because you might be employed in an activity that requires a lot of your time, then what's left over is really left up to you. And if you decide to cultivate the hobby of the mind or spiritual practice, that is completely up to you. There are people that go to the gym. You have your 1 meter monastery. That's the difference. But there's no animosity between the two groups because there's no friction between them. Not psychologically and not physically. Isn't that wonderful? You're not in your neighbor's business, and your neighbor's not in yours. That's the definition of civilization, isn't it? You can wish them well, and you can also assume that they're doing the same thing. If they're not, that's on them. Because who gets to dine on their ill will? It's them. But of course, with vicarious joy, mudita, you would not wish that for them. And again, you're assuming that they're doing that anyway without you telling them that, because they know how precious it is to be so happy for accomplished people, to be so happy for the liberated people. Should they just find one moment of relief, one moment of silence, one moment of calmness, and perhaps many moments to come. On top of that, that you would feel so well for them. You would wish them so well on their journey through this bardo, and that they would do the same for you. They're doing the same for you. They're wishing you all well. The 1 million at least are wishing you all the well in the world. They're wishing everyone well. All living creatures wish them well. But yeah, you don't determine whether or not you gain recognition or in the right way, with right view, from unskillful people. You don't get to pick and choose the interactions you would desire and miss the ones you wouldn't. But you can skillfully, to the best of your ability, avoid the unskillful and cultivate the skillful. But the primary focus is on one's own practice and one's own journey, because how could it be any other way if one was not delusional? So don't be delusional, but we can be delusional, so we work on that until we get back to right view via right effort, and then we stay there for as long as we can. But we don't have it all the time. But when we get lost, we don't give up the ship. That wave that just slammed you against the pilot's door and smashed your head out the window, that's just what's happening right here, right now. That's not the end of the story. Caught you by surprise. This here thing called life. But after seeing them stars, you're going to be crawling back to the steering wheel the best you can. Because it's not heroic to give up on your life that way just because you got hit by a wave or two, is it? And if you happen to dry out, or there's a lull in the storm and you can pass off the steering wheel for a while, or you might fall unconscious for a while and you wake back up and you're still on course after a while, because you noticed that your hands didn't move at all for a while, then that's perfectly acceptable, isn't it? It's acceptable to captains to have scars up and down their faces and bodies and hands, that are still smiling on a bright day because they can, because they've weathered those storms. So yes, they have. They don't look like the little boys that they once were, but they're doing very well for themselves, all things considered, even if that means every bone in their body has been broken. Every thought in their mind's been broken. Every conceit, every fetter's been broken. Every hindrance been broken. Every doubt's been broken. They're doing A-OK for themselves. Thank you very much. Another good saying, just a little bit better today. How about that as a quote? You can just print that out, put it in your cubicle. Just a little bit better today than yesterday. Do things today a little bit better. If your tolerances were wacky yesterday, make them better today. Each piece is its own piece. But of course, if you're within tolerances, you are okay. You're not perfect, you're within tolerances, acceptable limits. But they're also pretty exact. You're not like you were as a beginner. But you have to be a beginner when you're a beginner to become intermediate and expert and so on and so forth. So you have to have patience with yourself during the entire process and compassionate too. For example, if you have to change to a different time shift, understand that that's not an easy thing to do in and of itself. And it has side effects as well, such as feeling tired, as if one was jet lagged. For a time until one adjusts, and then even then it becomes somewhat disorienting because you're not in sync with everyone else except whatever function that you're performing together with others who are on the same wavelength or time zone, even if you're in a different time zone, if you catch my drift. Because 24/7 operations do have at least 2 shifts, 12 and 12, which I don't recommend. I think 3 or 4 shifts is probably better. 4 shifts is probably better than 3 shifts. Less time, but more time for life, but you're also not in sync with the other shifts, so that's just the way it is. You don't have to see that as a bad thing. You can see the good sides of that. But at the same time, any social organization can decide that your company or contribution is not commensurate with either their ability to pay you or their ability to respect you or the ability of them to see the potential within you, which they may not. People are people, right? And sometimes it comes from higher up. Oh, let's just discontinue the project. If you're personally invested in a narrative, that's going to screw up your mind. You might take personal offense, but it wasn't meant that way, because changing forms and conditions are that way. Now, we would like perfect outcomes, but they don't always happen. But if it is bearable, then that's exactly what it is. And it might be a period of training for an extended period of time until you can see what the benefit of that investment may or may not be. But you cannot lose perspective during that time of adversity where it is unclear what is the point of whatever training it is you may be engaged in, which might be rather complex and not straightforward, such as psychological inquiry or journalistic inquiry or just general curiosity and experimental playfulness without commitment to any old given outcome, that the outcome develops itself with the skill during the training. And because you're outcome independent, essentially anything could happen, including 2 minutes to live. And so you don't get too far ahead of yourself. And nothing is certain anyway, so why shouldn't it be bearable? So, if you're truly socially dynamic, you'll be able to accept those realities of life without the attachments and unnecessary suffering and just stay like a cat, flexible and buoyant, and here today in the here now and not anywhere else. Which means that our curiosity, like the cat, can also get us into trouble. So you should refrain from being too curious about things that may appear to be something worth further contemplation when in fact they're not. Right? Curiosity killed the cat. So don't be curious about everything. But if you do get into, let's say, things that ultimately prove themselves to be dissatisfying, well, don't feel any regret about backing up out of those things. It's just part of life. And that can be companies, organizations, societies, working groups, classes, any kind of social organization or structure, or business, or customer base, or you name it, demographic. You can do it if you try. You can drop it if you must or should, or it's something's changed from your side, which is absolutely possible and frequent, in fact, and that it means not that you're some kind of bad person. It's just that you changed your mind, you changed your view, and possibly to a righter view. But you could be wrong, but if you are, you will admit it at some later date, and you'll also gain the insight from it, preferably, even if it takes longer than some people might expect, or you might expect. I was really surprised that all these bullet wounds took so long to heal, and then after I was healed, I was really surprised how much longer it took to get over that. But now that I'm over that, it really just seems like a very short period of time in retrospect. But it sure didn't before I got there. But of course, those bullets are just metaphors for adversities in life. Fill in your variables, those are your bullets. It's a good thing comedy's free, because otherwise I would have ran out of it a long time ago. Here's a point, coming back to the point. It's only meaningful if it has to do with good and noble and wholesome things. It really does. See, we got wholesome, they got us into wholesome foods, but they forgot about the wholesome spiritual practice part that's so much better for you in terms of mental health, which is really important. It's more important than physical health, I would say. Although having physical health is a great springboard for good mental health, such as not being obese and doing what it takes to not be obese, and to do it again and again and again, each mind moment, to cease and desist in harmful behavior of all kinds, social, cultural, economic, political, nutritional, and physical. Sort of like in that order. So if you're a buff body, please make that mind and that chitta, yourself, free of the kilesas, as an Adonis, in a metaphorical sense, as in the spiritual noble sense, and not just in the physical sense, because that would be a damn shame if you have the one and not the other, and don't know how to get there, and don't put in right effort or right view. That would be a disaster. That would be a disaster. Oh no. How did it happen? What a disappointment. Yeah, well, these things aren't easy. So if you have fallen down every step like I have, like I think it's been thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of them. Well, There is the redemption module, which means brushing yourself up off, starting at the point you're at, the here now, and determining to do better for yourself so that you can do better for others at least. But usually the two go hand in hand. It's very rare that harming yourself is good for others, or even if you think so, you could be confused as in the delusional realm. Delusionality is much more prevalent and common than postmodern people want to admit for egoic reasons. It's one of those shadoic things where they can't admit it to themselves, but they know it's true, but they still won't stop because they're in denial, and they're also not putting in right effort because they don't really have right view. They've been told religion and spiritual stuff, that's all just malarkey. Don't need that. That's just a distraction from the real things in life. Well, oops. That's a wrong view, isn't it? The people who know that is wrong view. The older you get, the more you know that that's wrong view, because you won't get old if you have that view. And if you did get old having that view, you're not in a better place than people that don't share that view. Not even close, I'm willing to bet. Unless you're just a very vulgar kind of easily distracted, easily amused, easily satisfied kind of person. But that's probably not true either. It's just NIMBY. It's not in your backyard, maybe, and so you can entertain such naive views. But people dealing with old age, sickness, and death at least could use a little bit of religion. I think especially young people, if they got told that they should get in the practice early and stick with it and never let it go kind of thing, that they might save themselves immense amount of suffering and misguided kinds of escapades that they might not come out of unscathed. Not just in this bardo, but in the bardos to come. Yeah, for example, drug-addicted people, according to Buddhist theology, can be seen as heading towards the hungry ghost realm, or already hungry ghosts that haven't shed their human body yet, but they will continue that way. Yet they will have nothing to satisfy that with, and they will cling to this realm. And it's a very, very, very terrible kind of existence that people should be informed about, and also afraid of ending up that way. Afraid enough not to go that way. Afraid enough not to see it as some kind of trivial thing. To become a hungry ghost, it's not cool. It's not cool at all. It's terrifying. It's horrifying. It's devastating. It's dehumanizing. It's a social, family, personal kind of neighborhood, region, state, country kind of catastrophe, and needs to be seen as that. This is not casual kinds of mistakes that ends up in manifesting hungry ghost symptoms or hungry ghost existences. So for those still in the fortunate human existence, even if they are now addicted and they are listening to this, they have the key in the form of practice and the importance of it to free themselves from such a future karma or causality with right effort and right view. But right view means not being ignorant of these matters, which perhaps just 5 minutes ago you were. This strange tale, this strange voice has told you something that may be of priceless value. if you were to slow down on the words and allow the meaning via osmosis sink deeply into your consciousness, which might also root itself in your subconscious, that you might forget these words in 5 minutes, but they will come back to you to put you on the right path or the redemptive path, that it's possible, and that sometimes it's mischaracterized as religious practice, but it's essentially philosophic, practical, pragmatic, and wholesome practice without ideological kinds of components to it. See, the ideological module is not one that is recommended. See, but they are out there and people have them, are plugged into them. But that is essentially wrong view. So if you have it, you need to disconnect from that and connect or not connect to other modules other than, let's say, the redemptive module to begin with, which is extremely wholesome, extremely foundational. And then adding a little directionality and right effort, step by step, at your own pace, with extreme understanding of personal responsibility for your own damn life, taking agency over it, and saying, yes, this world can be unfair, it can be terrifying, it can be terrible, it can be wrong all the time, but spiritual practice, the practice, can get us psychologically out of unnecessary suffering, if it really is the case, such as suffering about the past or the future, or visions of those things, delusions. If you can dispense with them just for 5 minutes, you will have gained 5 minutes without suffering. How valuable is that, do you say, to some people who are suffering immensely? Well, they would give everything they own to experience that. But even if they did that, they still won't experience that if they don't have right practice. So take my word for it that it's considered to be something more valuable than dirt, for example, or air. That it's a little bit more rare and rarefying, that it is essentially what it means to have spiritual refinements or nobility. You cannot go to a boarding school necessarily and just get it. It's a practice that you practice. Can you measure precisely with precise instruments? Yes or no? Maybe you think you can, but have you really tried it? Do you know what the level of science is in meteorology right now? Probably not, but you just thought you knew how to measure things precisely. But your measurements are way off. They're not reliable. And your views are not reliable. And the distribution of views in our society via disinformation and psychologically damaging material set forth by malign actors with state budgets and state organizing, for example, in a multipolar world, post a failed globalization and a couple of brokers and other dirtbags, that you should be very cautious about how you think, what you think about, where you're getting your information from who, who's paying them? Did they say a couple of whoppers before? If so, they might not be credible. And why are you listening to people that aren't credible or have lost their credibility? Why aren't you more locally active? Why don't you look a little bit closer to your life and maybe dial things down to 0 for a while and just see what happens? Because you don't have to control the world, because the world is and has always been out of control. The serenity prayer is also about recognizing that fact. You need to find and focus on what you can change, such as your views, especially your views about life, this existence, the purpose of it, and how to live sensibly, and stop thinking about aggravating things. Do it the better way. That is the best revenge. But the better way is not the more competitive or adversarial way, it's the more understanding and cooperative way, but not with everyone. People who just think, oh, I'm going to be a good person, I just go out in the world, they don't end well. They're taken for a ride, and a lot of dummies since the 60s have been taken for a ride in the United States specifically, but in the West in general. We were sold utopianistic stories that don't check out upon further inspection, that are in fact a vehicle for displacement and oppression and subversion. What a surprise. How terrible, right? But maybe they thought it was a war and acted that way, and they just had the advantage, first mover advantage, and that's what it looked like. Is that a possibility in this crazy place called Earth? Different places, different changing forms and conditions. Well, look, things can change any old way, can't they? They can change back to civility, dignity, and respect, but only with the right people that share the right values and don't just give that lip service, but deliver what they promise, or don't promise too much, or don't have too very high expectations. But civility, dignity, and respect never really did cost anyone anything in material terms. Did it? Where's the menu where I can order that up and the prices are listed? They aren't. It's a personal effort that is required for those things to be maintained individually and socially. And this can be done globally, but with friends who share those values, countries that share those values, administrations that share those values, committees that share those values, economic actors that share those values, and not the other kind of actors that seem to prevail now in, how shall we say, an atmosphere of heavy disinformation and lobbying efforts that are also opaque. Is that surprising to people to hear that? See my comedy routine. Never forget it. Is that surprising to people? I thought I was a comedian, not a computer. But apparently I figured that out looking for jokes, and smart people have completely overlooked that reality that we're living in right now. And who's supposed to do something about that? Well, I guess comedians can make jokes about that. So because I did that, I guess I've done my job. But as far as responsible parties, I guess they're going to have to just realize that they've been taken for a ride for a while from a rather surprising vector, but it's not unknown in the world. How about used car salesmen? Hey, it's a car, you could really use it. It's really good. Well, they're not telling you what it's really like, are they? Because they're trying to sell the damn thing, and we've been sold a pack of lies. And the numbers prove it. So what now? Can we junk the car we bought and regroup, rethink where we're heading as a country, and then do things differently with our peers, with ourselves, with our friends in the world? Can we do that? Can we dare to do things differently? Is it possible? Of course it is. So why isn't it happening? Who is throwing the brakes on? Who has a problem with that? Well, guess what? They're not good people. They're really not. People who throw the brakes on good things, Their reasons are phony. They're baloney. They've got nothing but fairy tales, but they don't deliver, they just block. And that's what a lot of these people have been doing. They have just been free riding with the thinnest of veneers of they're doing something for someone. It's intangible. It's a snow job. So again, let's forgive ourselves and move on, but let's move on and just take an inventory. What's left? What can be preserved? What can be built upon and what can't? If we're talking about a 60% loss, a 70% loss, 80% loss, 90% loss, or just a 20% loss, these things all matter, but essentially you have to switch your mindset to that way of thinking in order to get past the current impasse that people seem to be stunned in based on these kinds of surprising developments to the downside. A bad surprise. Une mauvaise surprise, n'est-ce pas? Same things happen in France. Look, Germany, you're not alone. The whole world is reeling under these malfeasant kinds of underhanded tricks. So if it can happen there, it can happen here. It did. Let's all just move on collectively, shall we? At least we can put a historical dot or comma or semicolon behind a paragraph like this and imagine the future different with people that are authentic, that want the best for us all, including spiritual practice and comedy and good social conditions, economic conditions, cultural conditions, the whole package. So have you voted for the Mobilize Party yet? Hashtag Mobilize. Where's my coffee? Didn't have enough for a coffee to send it today. There was just too much to do. So hit that link. It's down there in the description. I don't know why I have not been flooded with a tanker. That I have not been sent a tanker of coffee yet. Because those things, are just sailing around now with no transponders on and stuff like that. But nobody sent me a tanker of coffee yet. But maybe that'll change now that they heard this. And the whole world can then shift to seeing and doing things differently than this whole escapade that we've been sent on implies, which is nothing good, which it wasn't intended to be good. The only thing that confused people was the disinformation associated with it. So people can cash out that we're in on that. They can stop doing the bad thing. And they can determine to do the good thing. And that's what the redemptive module is all about. But again, it's not going to work on everyone. And the people and forces that unleash these things amongst us, they never believed the utopianism that they wrapped this stuff in. They knew from the beginning that it was harmful. And they wanted it to be that. And it was that, and it is that. And so, no, these are not utopians you're dealing with. And as painful as it might be to realize that, it's better to realize that than not at all, is it not? Someone wrote in, was like, I'm really shocked. I'm very shocked. Help me. Thank you. Yeah, well, look, have you ever had a practical joke played on you? Now, I don't recommend it. I don't think these types of practical jokes are a good thing necessarily. Some people get into it way too much and it becomes annoying and probably inappropriate, unskillful. You ever meet people like that? Like they think that their sense of humor is always funny, but sometimes it goes wrong and they can't really make it a good joke. In retrospect, it was a bad joke, and even if they apologize, it's not really funny either. And you really hope they get the lesson, and some of them do. They might play their last practical joke at some point, like 14, like, oh geez, those jokes I was playing at 9 don't work no more. Or they're more trouble than they're worth. I thought it was funny until other people didn't, and then it wasn't funny, kind of thing. We grow out of practical jokes. So practical jokes, essentially, a lot of them are based on deception. Like one joke I knew as a kid was you sort of left the door half open, but at the top you balanced some type of object, maybe a teddy bear or something. So when somebody walked through the door, it fell down and hit them on the head. Just little things like that. Now some people would say that's cute and that's funny, and yeah, maybe it is that. But then you could upgrade to like a bucket or something else. And you see how things can go wrong. So look, I would say generationally we've had a practical joke played on us. Sort of targeted at different demographics at the same time. Older people had one, middle-aged people had a practical joke played on them, and young people, all at the same time, 3 different kinds of jokes. And then, of course, playing each of us off one another, bad-mouthing the people older than us and then younger than us. And then they just keep you in that zone of bad-mouthing through life, preferably, because being angry and critical about any and everything and all things is not a good way to live by anyone's standards. So if you can create a culture like that that's just critical and acerbic and acidic and caustic all at the same time, then yeah, you really haven't succeeded socially, economically, politically, individually. Let's get back to that final station. See, those other realms can act as sounding boards for blame, but that is not skillful. Anything that gets you to blame something is essentially throwing you off the middle path and into unskillfulness, but definitely into unskillfulness, into the kilesas, right? Aversion, not liking. That's a big part of it. I'd say that's like 60-70% of the kilesa realm. It's not desire that you need to watch out for. It's ill will. You need to scrub every last molecule of that out of your heart and mind. This is a fortunate existence. Make use of it. Weed out the defilements and vulgarities and commonalities and things that are sort of disgusting of all kinds, vulgarity of all kinds, and at least make yourself just a little bit better today than you were yesterday, in the form of, how about just polite manners, or not wanting as much as you wanted the other day, or being more generous than you were yesterday. You did a generous act, and then you did another and another. You took maybe 2-3 hours just to devote your time to things that you might find to be necessary, but other people might not, and also might not have the time or the planning or the personnel to make it happen. But you make it happen because you think it would be a good idea, but you don't come into direct conflict with people, places, and things. But generally, for example, just picking up litter, for example, that's something that everyone can appreciate, and really no one can take offense at. If you have the time to devote to it, you pick it up, but what does it matter if you do it or someone who was paid to do that and might not be doing that to the best of their abilities, or maybe they're overworked. Like, you could drive around 24/7 picking up trash after people, but that's not the point. But if everyone sees, oh, here's some trash, or I dropped some trash, and they pick it up themselves, or they pick up what they can in their vicinity to the best of their ability in their microenvironments with a frequency that works for them, it might just happen to be there. Instead of complaining, they proactively eliminate the bothersome thing, especially in places where people might be going to recuperate from devastating kinds of life experiences, disappointments, or they're just taking a break, like from the workhouses or boulder rollings or other harebrained kind of nerve-wracking everyday kinds of things, that they could have a breather in the park and it not be trash, just like the oasis in your mind that you can cultivate in the same way, and you can do both at the same time via an act of generosity, of devoting your time to something as absurd as that, and yet somehow it does have strange good karma, because the people that are invigorated in non-trash spaces, they have so much more power and energy and reserves to carry on doing what they do for the benefit of everyone, not just in society, their country, their city, their region, their household, their microenvironment, but for all the Bardos, the entire universe. In small things, so are the big things. The girl who appeared with the tapioca pudding and just handed it off to a random starving person that happened to be the Buddha, that changed the course of human history. It changed so many other people's lives so profoundly. And yet, yeah, it was done just as an act of non-thinking generosity, right? Non-thinking. Too much thinking. We're thinking too much. I think this was a negative side effect of the Enlightenment. We thought, okay, by thinking a lot, like Descartes, I think, therefore I am, which is wrong, by the way. It's delusional. What are you thinking about? And is it a good being or not so good being? That seems to be more relevant philosophical questions than that. See how dry rationality was and is? You can already sense the dry rot in it. But the juiciness is in the irrational things, like just being generous, also without counting up or trying to quantify what you'll get back by doing that, because that's sort of what sets you free. See, if you start counting up what you should be getting back for the effort you're putting in, and you overvalue your time, well, you could see how that could lead to constipated generosity. Okay, and I think that's a great way of looking at it. You guys need some of you need some Pepto-Bismol or something, because it's just me, mine, and F everyone else kind of mentality is atrocious and isn't good for the practitioners that practice such a misguided kind of worldview, which is just utterly vulgar on every level. There's nothing special about that. There's 5 cupcakes on the table. One greedy person comes in and dumps them all in their bag and runs out, instead of the person who might just cut half of one and say, hey, I didn't want to take the whole thing, so that one extra person could get a piece of something good instead of just everything for me. See, that's what vicarious joy, i.e. mudita, sympathetic joy, is all about on a social level. That can also be applied and must be applied individually for it to be congruent with the social aspects that are very good, have very good causality without knowing directly why that is, because we have faith and trust in that, because we know that less aggravating things in our microenvironments are really good things, essentially. And sometimes the only things we can do, even in the worst of times, even when we are suffering from practical jokes that have been played on us by people pretending to be experts, or people pretending to be fair or impartial, or working for the public good, when in fact that was just nothing but flimsy pretense, and in fact they were doing the opposite of that, such as camouflage netting does to nefarious activities. So selling good people things that aren't good in the name that they are good is the basis, the most basic of frauds, is it not? Here, these pills will give you eternal life or something like that. These pills will cure gout, and they don't. But the person they take the money from, see how that's a basic act of deception? And the people that do that see themselves as being in the advantage, but maybe the person that they tricked is someone that is perhaps the best barber in town, always open, always professional, etc., etc. That guy dies 20 years before he should, because he ate the crap pill that the pill salesman sold because he could make $20 on goofy crap, kind of. You see how that bad karma socially can happen just with the smallest of bad dumb deeds, or the greed as some kind of social more that's accepted or lauded, instead of being seen with disdain and disgust and derision, which is what it deserves, and not praise. But if your weeders are greedy and they condone greed or see it as some kind of ladder to ascension, then how could they poo-poo it in their gargoyle-like populations that they cynically rule over or think to know better than they do themselves, and will not admit a nobler path or consciousness or attainment? Because what could be more accomplished than the biggest thieves that took the most, according to them, they feel, don't they? So look, history is full of personalities like that. Epochs defined by bad influences like that. And yet, there's also the opposite of that. There's the ascendant personality, the ascendant culture, the ascendant wisdom and truth that could lead us all to better times, socially as well as individually. But of course, it starts individually and progresses over time in an authentic way, because it's undeniably something that is good, and really what make up good societies, which is a good sentiment towards other living creatures and not some kind of hateful one. But of course, within reason, you cannot overdo it and still claim to be on the middle path. It requires a pragmatic approach. so that one is not inundated with villainy and deception and denial or attack, but rather acceptance of hard truths as well as the realities of this world, and realizing that protecting good things is also a good thing to a certain extent. But those good things you protect are things that you should very clearly or with clear-eyed discernment decide what is really what. And not all people are cut out to figuring those things out. I would say, at least socially, men over 50 might have a couple of ideas if they do belong to the culture in an innate way, not an abstract way, that they would probably know the best way forward. But not many other people other than that. And that's just the baseline. That is not to say every man over 50 is qualified either. Maybe 80% aren't. But of the 20% that are, yes, that's where you'll find answers for the future, and nowhere else. Potentially nowhere else, okay? Look, there might be a few voices in the wilderness, of course. But any kind of norm is not going to be based on people from the wilderness. So what happened to these people, and what do they think again? And where do they see things going? And are they damn liars or classists or wealth guarding nomenclatura or not? Because if they are, they're not part of any kind of thing going forward. And that should be apparent to anyone with sense. But how many people are that again? I just need to emotionalize an issue. And all of that common sense could be forgotten in an instant. So civilization is tenuous. If you make the wrong decisions, it creates bad causality. And that can have a compounding effect. That can have a runaway chain reaction kind of effect. That is unforeseen. You have stupid, greedy people just thinking, oh, well, we'll just continue to rob people, and that's our leadership strategy. But that's not good enough to maintain civilization at a high level, is it? So understanding and respecting greed as a kilesa is one thing, but respecting greedy people is quite another thing, as they have earned no respect. Right? Greed is like people who doo-doo in diapers as adults. Now, look, there's medical reasons for it. That's excusable. But really with greed, it's never excusable. The person who took the 5 cupcakes, what reason are they going to give? They were hungry? Even then, it's inappropriate. If it was the setting I said. Now, if somebody said, here, all of these, you can take them, it's at the back of a factory and there's starving people around, maybe that's not the conditions, but that's not the metaphor I was talking about. That's an extreme situation, and who knows. But we're not looking for those. We're looking for the insight and wisdom. And greedy people, there's nothing admirable about greed. These are people who took too much, are taking too much, and want to take more. If they could get away with it, they would. See how close it is to criminality? Because, yeah, that's usually what motivates criminals to commit criminal acts. And if you co-opt or usurp leadership positions to wealth guard, essentially you've committed a criminal act as a class, if that's what defines the class, is greed. As well as all of their henchmen. And again, nomenclatura, this is a really stupid word. Sounds so bland, but essentially that's the blob. hangers-on of shakedown operations that don't deliver. And in fact, invite hostile forces into all aspects of our civic life, public life, cultural life, economic life, etc. and so forth. So have a unquantifiably detrimental effect, not just on us at the present moment, but our collective civilizations worldwide into perpetuity. So what is the cost of their services again, and why are they considered to be worth it? If objectively they're not, if subjectively they believe such malarkey, which is a psychological condition that many people are known to have, such as, or have had, such as Crassus. So it's not like the personality type is unknown, it's just that there's a lot of bad causality associated with personalities like that far exceed their value to the world, but of course they don't see it that way, do they? So what is good management? If you had a manager in a restaurant who thought that way and was acting that way, what do if you want to maintain or have to maintain a restaurant with high standards? Well, you have to fire that person and replace them with someone with the right values that doesn't just proclaim them, but implements them every day, every minute, every second that they are employed with that objective to do that job, which is what they do, what they've been put there for. And there is a feedback loop, because if the customers complain and it's legitimate and there's no improvement, that is not the right steward for the job, regardless of personality or ego or whatever they think versus what everybody else thinks, which is obvious in that case. But then what's culture again? We live in a cynical, topsy-turvy, what is truth kind of atmosphere. This is the atmosphere that gives these people cover so that they can essentially escape feedback, which is negative, which is overwhelming. So however much money they may earn is really beside the point, isn't it? But it's understandable that they would want to continue to be employed doing the things that they're privileged to do without any kind of accountability whatsoever. Isn't that what a very vulgar person would do in their position? Instead of resigning or refraining from having attempted such atrocities in the first place? But where do such bad habits and rituals and customs come from? Well, they must come from bad social circles that are self-reinforcing. Or is that not what a blob is as well? So there needs to be anti-blob measures, as well as a complete replacement of the management, as well as just reshuffling of the financial system and ownership to be in accordance with good working order and sense and values that we all know, love, and cherish, but they certainly don't. So I am certainly not the one as a comedian to lead such an effort, but I certainly would probably be able to recognize the beginnings of one just on the basis of the authenticity of the people, but that really does depend on them. And as we know, many people aren't very dependable, because what's so dependable about their views and opinions either? Thinking they're good people when they've essentially just been deceived and are a conduit for happy, sappy nonsense that has been utterly catastrophic to the point of genocidal conditions. But they're gonna what? Just wave their hand and laugh that off? Because what, again? Who is accepting that argument anywhere other than in, let's say, denuded Western pseudo-intellectual kinds of circles? Because we have to also look at other atrocities that have happened, such as, for example, the Armenian genocide. I think that we're looking at sort of an Ottoman kind of hybrid strategy, because first they did the cultural work, then they did the military work, or they did both at the same time. And slavery and human trafficking and drugs and criminality and thuggery and local politics and whatever else, housing and neighborhoods, all played a part, a disastrous part, which led up to the Barbary Wars. So this is a continuation of the Barbary War, essentially, with different components. Yeah, money and politicians have a part to play. It's a rather complex kind of campaign that's continuous, that also has a big disinformational component to it, and a lot of brokers, a lot of moving parts. But essentially, a war-like campaign effort to undermine and subvert peoples other than themselves, using different things that they can exploit towards those aims, which, such as in the Armenian case and in very many other cases, Asia Minor in general, led to catastrophic outcomes that lasted centuries. So would that be something that terrible people would do? Have they done it before? Would they try it again? Again? And again and again, and just hope that there's enough dummies to keep the ball rolling for them for however long it rolls for them? For what reason again? Who's with them again? Who needs them again? So yeah, piracy is sort of what we're looking at. At least that's what they called it, but I think that already shows that the people didn't really know what they were dealing with. Most people, these colloquial words, oh, pirates, just people, irregulars that showed up and grabbed people. We have sort of a really goofy understanding of what that was all about, apparently. But in an information age, you wouldn't have expected that, but in many cases, we've become much dumber while thinking we know more. We could call it the Google syndrome, which, of course, these big companies are a big problem as well. But yeah, nothing's insurmountable. I mean, anybody can talk about anything, right? So why wouldn't people talk about that if it is problematic and has been for some time? But of course, appearances could be deceiving. Who knows? I mean, maybe a committee could find out more than someone just spitballing or throwing darts on a board. But who would be the experts that could confirm that? I don't know at this time if we have credible ones, but that certainly is something that's past due. Additional scrutiny of such things in its entirety, all the way down the line to the microns. Because it is that important that we survive together as a civilization, doing good things for good people, and not the opposite of that. I think we can all agree, but of course, there's going to be some dissenting voices, and I think such committees should also identify those voices and also ask them some more questions, because perhaps people are mistaken about their positions, but maybe they aren't. Why not have open views without accusations? Just maybe, I don't know, 1,000 questions. And then see if these things can be followed up on and verified. And to also do that. But I don't know, maybe being lackadaisical is a good thing for civilization to be, but maybe also not in matters such as this or that. But perhaps in other matters they shouldn't be as invested as they are, such as red herrings instead of the essential issues. But I don't know. See, I'm a comedian and other people are, hashtag mobilizing, because what else would one do in the face of such multitudinous problems, actions, reactions, people, places, and things, and intent, and the list, I could just keep writing it, but I think leaving it there is more than enough. At least enough to be funny. Someone wrote in, was like, I heard you mention the word absurdism. Don't you think that's a little undignified? Thank you. No, I don't. I think absurdism is something that, okay, you can overdo it. It's always about the middle path. But absurdism brings a lot of comedy and humor into life. It's sort of a more natural, unforced way by not expecting rationality or sanity or goodness, which is really helpful in a purgatory-like realm where things go the wrong way while people are insisting it's going the right way, kind of. A meat grinder for your psychology if that is what you were expecting, which may have been the case in more wholesome times, but we don't live in those times. And it doesn't look like that is the norm at this time. But of course, that could just be this micro perspective from time to time, which can be absurdist. And the absurdist module can manage all of it. It can manage all of the absurdities of life. And there's a lot of absurdities in life. And it gives you a semi-wholesome way to get out of those absurdities. And yet at the same time, because it's just a module, you're not just trapped in absurdism per se, because there is meaning to life, but it is something that requires right effort and right view, to say the least. And a lot of people aren't putting in enough effort, and they're not looking in the right place, hence unnecessary suffering. And these people are suffering immensely. Let's have that compassion, right? Om Mani Padme Hum, right? Ma, compassion. How many of us have suffered unnecessarily? Let me see a raise of hand. Yeah, that's everyone. So some people are suffering more, some are suffering less. And some would be suffering immensely more if they weren't practicing with right effort, like meeting the crushing kind of depressing, disturbing, disappointing, pernicious kind of thing at the point of contact and defeating it like a dragon slayer with their own fashioned tools that they picked up and forged and pieced together from the trash and debris of the world, not just their lives. Their lives are meaningful. The world really is meaningless in a way, except for the spiritual dimension where it's not. The more skill you attain in this lifetime, the better it is for you in this lifetime and the lives to come. That we do not discount life after death or lives after death, to even give it more perspective. Lives plural, perhaps on different planets in the universe, different dimensions, right? Different timelines. We explode the conventionality of the materialist. We radically adopt all different types of absurd ideas, like, reincarnation, which really isn't all that absurd. If it's a metaphor, then it's meaningful. If we making it meaningful, it's meaningful. If they can't disprove that it's meaningful, then it's still meaningful. And absurdism can be meaningful if it's used wholesomely and in the way I just described, to get people through some of these absurdities of life. Look, somebody say, no, there's no absurdities in life. Well, that's not the person that's going to make it. So if you're a young person, you don't see the need of it, okay, fine. But once you're ready for it, it's there for you. And it's a plug-and-play module, and it helps you get through situations that are not rational, that have to do with sadism. Tyrannical sadism has to do with ill will, greed, and delusion, those types of things that are in this realm, not just in your life with your variables, but in everybody's life and all of the variables and all of the dimensionalities of this life. And yet you can still reduce that or mitigate it by imbuing your life with meaning. However small and however absurd, especially when it's absurd. Especially when it doesn't have to have a meaning anyway, except to you, even if it is to prove absurdity in some minute case, minute instance. Keep going. It's absurd, but keep going. Because it's absurd, at least in that view that you have right now, you can accept the absurd and still keep going. That's the power of it. That you can find meaning in meaninglessness, which is the ultimate paradox, which is a part of Dagas. So harness that power. Cultivate it. Just don't overdo it. You overdo anything, it will not be good. You want to lose weight? You go past the BMI? What are you doing again? Or is that the middle path? No? Is that good? Is that wholesome? No. And yet, sometimes we go in the absurd direction, but the absurd direction helps the redemption module. Because we can, at some point, recognize what we're doing or how we're thinking, how we're viewing things as absurd, and we can distance me and my, or self, from that thing. Ni, no self. Om, mani, padme, hum. Each syllable means something. Om, there's that generosity. There's that dana. Overflowing. The Om of the universe, overflowing with abundance. Ma, compassion. Ni, no self. Pad, diligence, right effort. Pad, right effort. Me. No self. Home. Wisdom, right? All that, pack that into wisdom. Wait, see, knee, patience. I sometimes get them switched, mixed up. Knee, patience. Like, you never have enough time to wait. Or you have never enough time to wait. Knee, right? Somebody trying to rush you, the Khaleesi's trying to rush you into some unwholesomeness. You have all the patience in the world. Maybe I'll sleep on it, right? Let me sleep on this. Let me give myself a sabbatical. Let me take a couple of weeks off. Let me take an hour off. Let me take the next 5 minutes and just think about something else for a change, just give myself a break and let things develop, not try to force things, not be ambitious. Let things come to you. You have time. You're doing well for yourself. You don't have to rush out and get this and that necessarily. Patience, need, sort of, yeah, I don't need it right now. You need it, go ahead, take it. I'm good. I can wait. You need to get on this bus, I don't need to. I know when the next one's coming, and maybe I'll just call it off for the day and do it tomorrow because I can. I'm patient. I don't need to have it right now. And if it never comes, then it wasn't meant to be. You can be patient. The person comes, takes that job, takes this job, you didn't get the job. Well, you got maybe the 4th or 5th job, and it was much better for you that you got that one and not the other ones. This person, that person, didn't happen. That's the best that could have happened. Another day, something good can happen, but you're not chasing it. Ni. Om mani padme. See, me is then no self. Like me and mine, no. Not me and mine. Pod, diligently no self, right? Diligently feeding self. Egotistical attachments. And home, that's wrapping it up. That you home that into your wisdom and you repeat it 1,000 times a day. Om mani padme home. That's going to seep in with that home. That's wisdom. That's compact, hard-hitting, practical wisdom that your mind needs to repeat to itself over and over and over again until it finally gets it, until it's fluent, until it remembers the rightness of each principle, does not forget or mix principles. Right? Ma, compassion. Me, no self. Right? Ni, patience. Be patient with yourself. See, compassionate patience, mani. Compassionate patience. You have to be compassionate with yourself so that you're patient. If you're rushing yourself, you're not being compassionate. If you're impatient, you're not compassionate. Mani. Pod. Right effort. Every time, right effort. See, that's right in the middle of this pill. That's where the efficacy comes from. Without right effort, nothing matters. This wisdom means nothing without a pod, right? That's the kicker. That's that chili powder in the salt, water, sort of Buddha diet kind of thing. That cuts the weight off. That cuts the weight off of heavy things, heavy burdens. It's not right effort to wallow in sentimentalities, in what ifs and delusions. That's not right effort. That pod, it's a launch pad. That's the right effort. It's the launch pad. You will get out of this atmosphere. any atmosphere you rocket off a rocket pad with right effort in the right direction, in the right way with the right equipment, that's right effort, you shall succeed. You will reach the stars. You will not be bound by gravity, by hindrance, by anything. Pad, that launch pad, but in the right direction. See, you have to temper it with ni, patience. Let that wisdom seep in. Just because you heard that once, you're nowhere near where those things can take you. You have to cultivate them. Ni, patience. Cultivation requires patience. You can say Om 1,000 times today. That still doesn't mean it's sunk in enough to produce dana, to produce generosity. But it's a beginning. It's that rain in the desert. Little drops, it's maybe just fog at first. It's the dew. But yesterday there was no dew. Today there's dew. There's Om. You said it 5,000 times. That's dew. You might consciously think that was nothing, but subconsciously, dew is to the landscape what Om is to the spirit. Moon, planet, and river practice. Early morning before sunrise practice. Triangular fist bow practice. Tao practice. Don't forget the Tao module. Tao module. You might leave some things behind, but don't leave that. Because there really is no such thing as the jade diamond vehicle without it. Because you can't really have a high-tech kind of vehicle if you don't have the terrain for it, the universal elemental terrain for it to interact with in a dynamically satisfying way that incorporates skill to the levels of subtlety, because it is not overt. But that subtle meaningfulness seeps in via osmosis. Forms like dewdrops without comprehension, and yet it is the truth should one commit oneself to the principle of cultivation, the principle of bonsai. Imagine endless streams of bright yellow silk shining in the sun, with the wind carrying, billowing veils of that priceless color into absolutely every, down to the molecular level and beyond the atomic level, imbue you with its nobility. The Lord of the Patience module, V, easy to overlook, therefore all the more valuable. If the hand of the Buddha Dhamma was extended to you, would you reach out for it and grasp it tenderly? Or would you pridefully reject it? Would you see the extended jeweled hand of Bodhidharma or Bodhidharma? Would you have the wherewithal to kiss it? Or would you insult it and dismiss it instead? Brothers and sisters, please choose wisely what hands you reject and which ones you grasp. Those two have not been known to fail. Greed, ill will, and delusion, should they grow as if on a plant, you can snip them off as they arise and still maintain dignified cultivation, because it's an active measure, it's an active awareness, it's a living practice, is it not? No stunned visitor to a bonsai, which is hundreds of years old, asks how many times it has been cultivated and in what way, some of which are somewhat messy, such as repotting, for example. And yet, the skill in the matter over years is discernible, is it not, to aware people? And yet perhaps much work went in behind the scenes to make it that way. How could it be different? Because otherwise it would not be manifest. And here it is directly under your nose, and you still don't see that or know its value. I was talking to a passerby and I said, it's very human to die of disease, but it's superhuman not to. At least your basic diseases that science has identified and more or less eliminated, if you get the cure and you also follow the right procedures, you can heal and survive, unlike 2,500 years ago. But the metaphor is there. Science is not at odds with penicillin practice of the mind, which is to say, that type of metaphor, you have to see the kalesis in terms or as being similar on a certain level. Now, of course, people can take metaphors very far. They might not take them far enough. But it's a very useful metaphor. It's been made by lots of people, but as we see today, lots of people don't have contact with people who we would think would have common sense, but we know common sense is not common, especially not in propagandistic, disinformational environments with an educational kind of component to it. No way. That's a lot of people with a lot of bad views and opinions and wrong ideas about psychology, life, history, health, what is good, what isn't good, what is advisable, what isn't advisable. How about it's a smart idea to walk around in a slovenly way. And if you do take good care of your things and how you appear and the equipment you carry and use, and something like you're somehow fancy, when in fact just the norm for dishevelment has been either imposed or developed on its own for whatever reasons. But sloppy, looking sloppy and being sloppy, there's usually a correspondent kind of causality associated with that. Or not. Oh, something valuable fell in the trash pile that I have next to my driver's seat. So how am I going to find it real quick going 70 miles per hour and not have an accident? Kind of causality that, just imagine every year 3,000 people die that way. Easy, just because they're disorganized and engaged in a dangerous activity that they underestimated. They underestimated the variables. And the results, were they not catastrophic? So anybody can underestimate variables like chalasis and their proliferation versus that bad causality versus the opposite of that. But just because we have the means to spread good information does not mean that that actually happens. In fact, the opposite of that has taken place, at least for some years now, by some very most likely to be criminally prosecuted kind of parties that also just might be fly-by-night operations, because that's what they were intentionally set up to do, to jam the culture kind of thing. So anyone deluding themselves into thinking, well, that's a good thing for me and other people, they are deluded. That's that third realm. So if you have some pruning shears and snip that part off, you're then in the world of civilized reality. You're essentially a member of civic or civil society, despite what the water armies might say about you, or their gossips and agitators and misrepresenters and misinformers kinds of elements that you might think is normal, but really isn't, but was made that way intentionally by bad actors with a bad strategy that is not known to lead to success for understandable reasons. But if experts aren't stating that fact publicly enough, apparently they're able to spread even worse ideas with even worse results. So let's have some understanding for people who have been just terribly misguided in these neo-barbaric kinds of times, and afford them the redemption model and also the penicillin model, so that they can achieve miraculous states of health, especially of the mental health variety, in a consistent, repeatable, achievable way that does not involve drugs, for example, unnecessarily, but does have a lot to do with right effort and right view and personal responsibility for both of those things that are also achievable, if not the normal thing, especially not today. But that does not mean it's not achievable, just like penicillin practice. It's amazing what that stuff cures. Absolutely amazing. It is miraculous. And so is a practice like this. At least the penicillin practice module of it. For people suffering from all different types of diseases at one time, which is usually what penicillin is prescribed for. There's certain different applications, but of course not for everything. And if you overuse it, you weaken your immune system, kind of thing. But for people that are suffering immensely, that might be something that they would be willing to, for example, transfer all of their worldly assets to. And still feel like they came out ahead smelling like roses versus what the other option was, which was to die horribly from what people claim to be incurable diseases just, 200 years ago. There's no cure for that. That's what they say. No cure for the chalasis. People just die from that stuff. That's what they say, these Padujis at this time with big titles to their name. Like chemists in the 15th century knew everything. about green and yellow materials and blue ones, and that was about it. The extent of it, the extent of what we have now. Keep in mind that you can change the way you see anything. You absolutely can. And how about this? You also will change the way you see things, just as a function of time. If you look at the delusional mammalian creature that humanity is comprised of, if you expect that to happen, you will not be disappointed. But if it does happen, you can also just change your mind. Changing forms and conditions, change your damn mind. What's not Taoist about that? You're watching a river now for how many hours? 3 hours? What has it taught you in terms of V, in terms of Tao, in terms of Qi? You have not been paying attention. You have not been putting in right effort, which is why you do not have superhuman views. But that is your personal responsibility. And it does not end in this, Bardo, is what the theoreticians say. So let doubt not hinder you, as we know it does. And prepare for that kind of reshuffling of the deck with the skills that you have attained. And realize that even if someone does something careless, if you eliminate that bad karma, essentially all of the bad karma that would have been associated with them is translated into good karma for you without anybody knowing it. It's an automatic process. And so just imagine what a turbo boost that can add to the Bardos to come, up to and including potentially Deva realms. Is that not how one of those paths go? So adversity skillfully transmuted is a extreme refinement and magically vital process. It's transformative, but it takes time, it takes effort, it takes diligence, launch pod. Diligence is right effort, consistently. Your execution might not be perfect, but your effort is perfect because it's always there. It's what starts the transformative process. Do not hinder it. I think often of Bhikkhu Cha and how he would artificially create austerities for what was in his mind, which was most likely the truth, too comfortable kinds of monks who were not transmuting that kind of, let's say, disappointment or dhutanga into turbo-boosted levels of elevation under normal conditions later. Kind of practice. And so that way of looking at any type of changing form and conditions, which might be considered to be even close to austere, but not, of course, on the level of Ajahn Mun, like what he would consider to be adversity versus what you consider to be adversity. and how he would deal with that versus you. That he would transmute that, whereas you would be hit with it like a frying pan in the face over and over and over again. That difference in skill. That expectation and perhaps even creation of austerities so that one may practice at that level. Someone wrote in, tell me more about this changing your mind stuff. Thanks. Yeah, well, here's something. You come across someone that, some antisocial goon, mutant, a socially disregarding, trashing, jamming kind of person that just like threw their whole kind of who knows what somewhere. Well, if you just say, well, how about this? You look at it this way. Maybe it was just they were having such a good party. Have you ever had that? Like where you were so euphoric about something that you just left it somehow, or maybe there was some type of, you had it on your backpack, but when you lifted your backpack up, wind gusts came and took it, and there was no way you were ever going to go back to that highway. You couldn't stop the car. You weren't even driving. And it blew and then fell, and then here you encounter it under a different circumstance, but you have the opportunity to pick it up and put it in a publicly provided receptacle that is just ready and waiting for such mishaps to happen. That you get that karma back, or in fact, maybe your indiscretion wasn't that great. And so, but by doing this, you have covered just a massive indiscretion, which would have otherwise led to bad karma because people would have been aggravated by it because they didn't have the skill to see it the way you re-saw it by first seeing it a normal, perhaps vulgar way, but then seeing it the other way, the superhuman way. Hey, this is a party place. People come here to party and they're unmindful, they're heedless, but it can be managed in an effective, vigilant way that doesn't necessarily require more policing against something that would then kill the party, sort of kill the vibe, right? Kill the feeling of freedom. But one would hope that such indiscretions wouldn't happen often. But you can get into some kind of crazy perfectionism instead of just managing it. Again, just sheer numbers. And 10,000 people went through the place. Every time you go through, it doesn't seem like anyone's there, but maybe there was a whole marching band. You just didn't realize it. So one bag a day thrown somewhere is within normal limits, apparently, in urban places. You just think what happened to Constantinople or Alexandria or, Ephesus, the sort of the civilized places of the ancient world, Lumbini. And then don't take things so hard, but at the same time, don't overindulge in dumb things or dumb people or dumb places for all too long. That's not necessarily necessary. You don't need to tarry in places. See, if a place is not good for tarrying, then it's not a place that's good for tarrying. Might be a better place for transit, though. You transit from here to there, or maybe the culture is set up, because the work culture is so set up that it's really only the weekends that the place matters in a public way. And the rest of the week, it's just completely dead. So what do you do to mitigate things like that? What would be nice things to have? I mean, for example, a convenience store is usually pretty nice to have in the vicinity that's pretty well stocked and has reliable personnel that is not hostile, for example. But if you can't have that look, changing forms and conditions, maybe it wasn't financially possible because the rents were jacked. And so the person that was doing that went out of business, and that's it, right? Unless people can come up with some more innovative ideas, like charging no rent to people who provide such basic services, and much more than that maybe they're even subsidized. That would be a creative, generous solution that would solve the problem and not just devolve it into a blame game or a woe is me game or a doomer loop kind of negativity game. Finally, if one is engaging in games, they should at least be entertaining and not just outrageously annoying and grating and dissatisfying, should they not. So God bless all the people that have been collecting the dewdrops of compassion and enlightenment and hygiene and purification and vital Tao energies from all areas, even the most difficult of places, and are making this place decision by decision, my moment by my moment, better for themselves and us all. God bless you. Amen. Can you change your minds? Can you? Why can't you? Change your minds in a wholesome way. They were changed in an unwholesome way, so change them back. That plastic bag that washed up on the shore of a river, it's quite annoying, isn't it? But think of the causality of it, the chain of causality. You can't even imagine how complicated. I could have a whole feature-length film 9 hours long that just follows that plastic bag along its journey. And that's just a snippet of it. Until it gets fixed into that landscape that is just changing forms and conditions all the time, every day. It's so unavoidable there, but we forget that when we get into cubicles and boxes and cardboard boxes. And we're so separated from that reality, but it does exist. It is the natural environment. It is the lesson that God is trying to teach us via symbols and forms and realities, such as just a flowing river. Sit down at a riverbank. Just make your appointment with it. And don't fish necessarily. What do you need fish for if you don't need it? But purify that mind and just watch that water. Lagus, just the power, the majesty, the lesson, changing forms and conditions. Let it flow. Let it break up all of those kilesas and make that impactful kind of meaningful raising of awareness, especially for lay people and working people. Because you're the most needed on the frontest of front lines every day. That alarm goes off. Or even if you miss it, you have to be there. So this practice is for you. It's DIY. It's what you can afford. It's free. But there is that coffee link. But it's free. See, dana is something you give back. That's what enriches you. It's payment on a different level. It's the payment on the satisfaction level. anything that can lead to good causality, it's playing the lottery, but one you can really win, really. So keep investing in that, and keep divesting yourself from those kilesas. Spoiler alert, old age, sickness, and death, those are the three things, the worst three things of this dimension. But if you constantly re-zero yourself to those, you can just harvest all that gratitude that every day can provide you for not being sick, not being dead, and not being old. Although there's a lot of old people that are very grateful for the other two things. If they're not sick or dead, they stay grateful despite being old. And what a wonderful sunset their lives then represent, just that striking color and nuance and beauty of their lives that end in a sunset like that. Impactful, meaningful nuance as they fade into the next bardo with such skill. Not clinging to things, not rushing things, just elegantly fading, fading, fading into an eternal sunset, into the eternal moonlight and the flowing river praxis.